Hey guys, I was actually trying to add Stephanie so that we appear at the same time, but let's see if I can add her now. Not sure what I'm doing wrong. Thought I've already invited her. Stephanie, can you see me? Add to stream.
I can see
That
you.
works? There we go. Wow, it's been so long since I've done this. I'm definitely a bit rusty.
Sorry.
How are you?
How are you?
Looks like we've lost Stephanie. Do I need to add you again? Let's have a look. Wow, Christy, thanks very much. New member but subscriber for almost a year. Let's try getting Stephanie back. I'm not sure where she went. She's not there at all. This isn't going to work without her. Wonder what happened there. She just disappeared. Invite a guest. Let's just give her a minute or two. I think she's back. Okay. Are you there? Hello?
I'm here now. I kicked myself off.
Okay, well, don't do that again.
Sorry.
Okay, how are you? It's good to see you.
Good, thank you. Excited to talk about CRIMECON. It was so much fun. How are you?
Yeah, at last. I mean, it was so much fun for you. I know you were so exhausted when you got back. It was like, this isn't going to happen today or tomorrow. And then your notes, just more and more notes coming out. That was pretty incredible.
Yeah, that's only three cases that I took notes on, and I took notes on like 15 cases. So
Wow.
I have a bunch more coming for you from all different episodes, from Dr. Henry Lee to the crime scene investigator that was at the scene and found Kaylee Anthony's bones. So all
Oh, really? Okay.
so much. Yeah, there's so many good ones. But I just wanted to I picked three that we had talked about most recently. I got to sit on JonBenet Ramsey's father, John Ramsey, and Paula Woodward's sessions. They had 2 sessions. And I got to sit on the session with Liberty German from the Delphi case, her family members, and with Paul Holes, who is a crime scene investigator, and the other one was
okay. So
I didn't go to, but I
okay.
I took notes on what I watched.
So how I want to do this live stream is basically we want to try and get. I mean, you've got quite a few notes. They're really awesome, and we want to do justice to each section. So we're going to try and oh, the lighting's like quite weird. I'm either overexposed or underexposed. We're going to try and like do justice to the JonBenet Ramsey notes that you took and all of that. And then if we don't get through it all, then I think we must sort of do a part 2, because I don't want to like rush it. I think we need to
it's a lot.
stew in the juices that all the notes that you took, right? So
yes.
Before we get going with the notes, do you want to take us through just kind of a little bit informally the whole kind of just in a bit of a narrative, how you arrived in Vegas, just what your impressions were, some of the stars that you saw, some of the journalists that you spoke to, some of the YouTubers that you hugged, some of the just some of the impressions you got, also some of the impressions of the true crime community. So kind of like general stuff, but try and take us through it almost like in a story form, like chronologically. When did you leave home? When did you arrive? Yeah, it doesn't have to be, but just to give us a sense of what it would be like in your shoes, kind of thing. And then I'm going to leave it to you.
It was a whirlwind getting there from Connecticut. It was about 10 hours of traveling. It should have only been about 6, but we had a layover. That our flights were changed last minute. And so we got there after, it felt like 12 hours of traveling, about 10 hours. And we got there early, like around lunchtime, and Vegas was hopping. And even in the airport.
So slow down. So on the plane, did you meet any people that you knew were going to CrimeCon as well?
Not that I talked with. There were some that I recognized from the plane afterwards.
Okay, so at the airport in Vegas, were there like CrimeCon signs and banners and flags?
Not a ton. There was like a board where you could take pictures, and it said like CrimeCon 2022. And what I noticed was the people coming from all the different terminals having their true crime gear on, like their t-shirts. Like I had a sweatshirt that said True Crime Junkie on it, and then underneath that I had my intertextuality shirt. I brought a couple other
ones. Really? Okay.
So my mom thought we were going to be going to like fancy cocktails and stuff. I was like, no, Mom, we're like comfy in our true crime gear. And it couldn't be.
So did your mom enjoy it?
Oh, she loved it. She
really?
loved it. And when we got back, she was the one who she messaged me about 4 days ago. So, are you going to go to the one in Orlando? And I was like, well, I was thinking about it. I was going to see if my husband wanted to go with me. And I was like, why? Are you interested in going? She's like, I might be. And I'm like, yeah. She was like, oh, you got to get the tickets the end of the summer before they go up. So I'll be going with somebody.
So was your husband also like, I want to go with next time, like when you told him the story?
He's not super excited. I was like, I want you to go. It'll be more, it'll be fun. Not more fun, but it'll be fun. And he's like, oh, I don't know. He's like, you might have more fun with your mom than me because I'm not really interested in that. And I'm like,
I remember not sure where I saw it, but maybe in a tweet or somewhere on YouTube, but Scott Reich made a comment because he was there, and he made a comment something like 99.9% of CrimeCon is women.
Yes.
Did you yeah?
Yeah, 99% women, and the men that were there with their women. The few that were there. There wasn't a lot of diehard true crime gentlemen that I saw. There were some, but there were 5,000 people there. Out of that 5,000, it wasn't I don't know, more than a couple hundred probably.
Okay, so take us through it. You arrive at the hotel. Which hotel did you stay at?
I stayed at the Palazzo, which is next to the Venetian, which is about a 20-minute walk to down the strip to where it was being held at Bally's and mostly Paris Hotel. So it was nice. We had a very leisurely walk in the morning, and at night it was gorgeous, all lit up. It was, I felt safe. I did feel safe. So we had 20
Was it your first time to Vegas?
I had been when I was in high school, I went with my family and we had gone to see Vegas, and then we went to the Grand Canyon and Hoover's Dam. So we made like a little trip out of it while we were in Vegas. So I didn't really see or remember too much about it, but it was a very different experience this time. It was busier than I remember the Strip being. There were a whole lot more showgirls out than I remembered seeing, and showmen. I don't know what you call them, but wanting to take pictures. And there was the true crime community. There was a large number of us, again, about 5,000 there were 5,000 at least that were there for that. And then it was also the NFL draft taking place at the Bellagio,
Wow.
which was literally across from Paris. So then on the plane, I was like, wow, it seems like there's like a lot of football players on, and now I know why. I probably didn't recognize some of them because I don't know a lot about football, but they were having their draft there that same weekend. So it was hopping.
Yeah, so a lot was happening.
Yeah, it was.
Did you have a thought when you were there, because of the shooting that happened in Vegas and that sort of copper-colored building, sort of like a yellow? Did you sort of look at that building and think, hey?
Was it Mandalay Bay? Is that where it was?
Yeah.
Yeah, we did think about that. My mom's actually staying there. She's going in July for a different conference, and she's staying there. She had brought it up. And one of the discussions that they had was about that shooting. One of the sessions was about that shooting, and they had.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they had one of the police officers and different people there that responded during that shooting, that mass shooting. And they had huge trigger warnings for the people saying, if you were here, you live in Vegas. There are trigger warnings for everything, but specifically I noticed for that one, there was an alarming amount. So I did think about that. Didn't really worry too much in the mornings. When we walked down, it was like between 7 and 8 in the morning. When we were walking home, it was not home. When we were walking back to the hotel, it was well after midnight, sometimes 1 o'clock at night. And so we tried our best to walk through through each hotel, rather than just the streets. But there were so many people out, and surprisingly tons of children. Not for
that is interesting.
but like
kids,
on vacation
take your
with their
kids
family.
to Vegas. Yeah. So what was the very first sort of meeting or conference or event that you attended?
The first one that I went to was, I think they call it like the glass room, and it had, I could show, I think like a map. What I could do is I could send my pictures to you, Nick, and you can put them on Patreon maybe, because they're going to be too small for my phone to show you here. But what I will do is I can show you kind of a map of that's in this brochure. Oh, I have it here. So this is how it was set up. And I can read you some. Yeah, so it's hard to do. This is Podcast Row. So if you had a podcast or True Crime Rocket Science was coming, you might be in here. They had different. I know Scott Reich was there not only for his channel but as a defense lawyer, so he was in here. In here is where I saw Nancy Grace. They filmed a show that we were on. And then they have breakout rooms. This is the ballroom where they held the John Ramsey one because it was such a big event.
Was that one of the bigger events, the one with John Ramsey?
It was packed. It was packed.
Really?
And that's why I think that they also had the the
Q&A?
Lori Vallow event the same time.
Yeah.
Because they were
Okay.
conflicting and they were both extremely popular and they need to spread people out. So they
Mm.
put the top events that even I wanted to see, or I was curious about watching at the same time. And so what that led me to do is then pay more money. So when I got home, I could see what I missed.
Oh, okay. So
So they
could
taped
anyone
that. And then,
ask, in that, because it's such a huge room, could anyone ask a question, or was there limited time, or did they just limit it to say 10 people?
Limited time. Each session was about 50 minutes. They didn't go a minute over. And they try to leave about 10 or 5 or 10 minutes. So there's only like, I think at most like 5 questions from audience members that got to be asked. In some instances, the audience members asked if they could continue speaking and not have an ask me anything, because we were wanting to hear more of what the presenters had to say in such a short amount of time.
Mm.
But anybody could ask a question. I didn't actually ask a question. My mom asked Nancy Grace a question about the Natalie Holloway case. And she also asked one, there was a mobster that was, whose grandfather started, or who built the Flamingo in the Flamingo Hotel in Vegas. And she had a question about his grandfather and how he thought they portrayed him in a movie she had watched recently. So she was all kind of brave. I'm like, Ma, I thought you didn't know anything. She was asking all these questions. And I'm taking notes in my notebooks.
Were there any rowdy true crime, CRIMECON guests, people who were sort of causing a ruckus, like, that's not true, or, was there any sort of, someone had to be ushered out the room kind of thing?
There was one, and it was in a session that I wasn't at, so I don't know much about it. One of them, there was someone who jumped up on stage, and I'm not sure what the drama was about. I could find out on the CRIMECON feed on Facebook. They have like all the drama listed. I didn't witness it. I didn't witness the drama. And then there was something
I wonder whether Will Smith has started a thing, because Will Smith went on stage, then there was someone else who went on stage with an actress, and I think served her divorce papers or something, and now something seems to have happened there. You can almost imagine any situation where there's a stage, it's like, I think I'm going to do a Will Smith, you know what I mean? Like, it's going to become like, if you want to go on stage, you go on,
I didn't see that myself. I, in fact, felt like, considering the extreme emotions that were present from the people on the stage, as well as people listening to them, I thought it worked out better than I imagined. I didn't know what to expect, but I thought it might be like a little bit like booing or something, and it wasn't. If anything, I think I might have been one of the only ones shaking my head voraciously during
I kind of had that feeling as well. By the way,
Yeah.
just to let you know, Cotton Star's in the house, and Grizzly True Crime is as well. So hi there. Real Batman, thanks a lot for that. But
yeah, thank you.
I don't
haven't
know,
been looking at the chat.
has Nisi been made a mod yet, or is she still in the process of becoming a mod?
She doesn't have a wrench. She needs an honorary wrench.
Oh, okay. I thought you did that, but I think I've got to do that. Okay. Okay, so do any of you guys have a question for Stephanie before we go into, just before we do that, tell us a bit about the people you met, like Scott Reich. What did you guys talk about? What is kind of going on? I think you said on Instagram that he's pretty tall. You were quite surprised that he was so tall.
He's like 1.5 feet taller than me. You can see in the photo on Instagram. He's very tall. I'm not very tall. I'm only 5'2", so I'm short. But he was towering over me, but he was so nice. My mom and I went up to him, introduced myself, told him that I watched his show, Crime Talk, and we just mostly pleasantries, nothing deep. And he had a picture set up that you could take a picture with him if you wanted to. So we did that, and then you could scan it on your phone and download it. So that's where that came from. He had actually had that set up, so I didn't even have to ask. That was kind of nice. You kind of feel funny asking, but he was such a gentleman. He was really down to earth. I feel like if I wanted to ask him anything, I probably could have, but it was just a flow of people coming, and it's kind of like pressure to say your hello and take your picture, autograph if you wanted one from somebody who might have written a book, and then you kind of move on. So he met so many people. I doubt that he remembers me. Obviously, I remember him, but I told him he was such a true gentleman. It's nice meeting the person behind the screen.
Mm. Did he make any sort of off-the-cuff remarks? Did he say something?
No, actually, I had mentioned to him that I moderate for a few true crime channels, and I listed your channel, True Crime Rocket Science, Grizzly True Crime, and the Interview Room. And I don't think he watches very many, because he was like, "Oh, that's cool," and I was like, "Oh, I guess you don't watch."
Have you moderated for him?
No, I haven't. I'm at my quota as it is. I feel like, I started with you, and then the Interview Room, and then now Grizzly True Crime, and I don't want to spread myself too thin in my personal life or to the creators. So that's it.
I see you gave Grizzly True Crime some good marketing. I think you put a picture. Yeah. So
yes, I have pictures of me wearing intertextuality too. It just wasn't on that day. That day was the meeting with Mr. Daniel Robinson, who she had showcased on her show.
You must send me the intertextuality photo. Then we can put it somewhere.
Yeah, sure. I got a bunch of pictures that we can upload.
And then did you meet any other people from the... Oh, thanks a lot, Grizzly True Crime, sending love from the Netherlands. It's actually quite weird having an American modding for two South Africans on opposite sides of the world. It's quite a weird...
It's a small world.
Yeah, it's quite funny. Yeah, I think sometime in the future we should try and do something with Grizzly True Crime. I don't know, like talk about Henry van Breda or whatever it is. Just maybe something.
The queen of collaborating.
Thanks a lot, Cotton Star. Thanks for that. I still don't have a straight answer from you. Did you meet Cotton Star when you were there? Are you allowed to say?
No, he watched virtually.
Oh,
he watched
okay.
from home. He paid to watch virtually because he wasn't able to travel for both the days. I was really looking forward to meeting someone from the community in person.
Yeah, I was looking forward to you guys meeting.
Yeah, I was too, but things happen, and there's always
who did you meet there that you hadn't known, that you knew kind of online but had never met in person before?
Well, I also met the creator Gray Hughes. I don't know if you know his channel. And then I met one of his mods, Amber Maiden. I met her.
From the behavior panel?
No, from Gray Hughes Investigates. He was actually there with allegedly So Mean. So Mean allegedly, a different channel he has as a podcast. But so it was interesting it was nice to meet another mod that was there. And
isn't there someone called Hughes on the behavior panel? Or am I missing the boat?
Oh, Chase Hughes. Yes.
Oh,
That's
okay.
not him. No.
Okay, yeah. Amy Hall, thanks very much for that. Wow.
I got to meet Nancy Grace, got to shake her hand. She's a firecracker, and I just loved her so much. I know she can be controversial. At least my opinion of her from seeing her on Fox Nation was that. But when I met her in person, she's just like the sweetest little itty bitty thing ever until she gets on the camera. So again, you see two different sides of people.
I can't remember what movie it was, but she was on some movie where I guess a crime took place, and then she was like she was Nancy Grace in the movie, and I thought that was really cool. I mean, you know, you've hit the big time. You know, like when they use a CNN commentator in a movie, and it's not really real, the news that they're presenting, but it's to give it credibility, whatever. So Nancy Grace in some kind of thing saying this crime happened, then you know you've hit the big time. You've gone totally mainstream in a way. You know, I can't remember which movie it was, but when I saw it, I was like, you know, wow, nice break. Nancy playing Nancy, you know.
Nancy playing Nancy. I was supposed to meet two friends from the true crime community, two of my friends from the true crime community, but because of COVID restrictions and things not working out, they had some family things, I wasn't able to, but I still went, and I'm still really glad I did. It is a community in itself. I met people there that I now keep in touch with, so that's cool.
Oh, really? Okay, so you made some totally new friends there.
Yeah, and then we'll meet up when we're in Orlando. It'll be fun.
Okay. I'm going to try and make Orlando, but it's quite difficult to project that far in the future at this point. But we'll see, yeah. So I thought it was quite funny when I did the April Fool's thing. Everyone seemed to buy it. Like, I'm going to be at CRIMECON. And in a way, I was there through you, right? Not quite the same thing, but someone kind of representing this channel, certainly in terms of getting some of the notes and so on, did go there. You were almost like a secret agent, especially in the John
I felt
Ramsey
like I was
thing.
like that crazy scene in, I don't know, whatever movie where Tom Cruise goes nuts on the couch, like dancing on the couch, like, yay, woohoo. I was like doing that when I read You're Going to CRIMECON. Like, wow, yeah, let's go. And I told my husband, he was like, really? He's like, that's awesome. And then he looks, he goes, you know, today's April Fool's. I was like, no. And it was like one high to one low real quick.
Yeah. I must say, just for those who don't know, just a little bit of behind the scenes. I actually saw Scott Reich's April Fool's joke, and I think it was something like, that was my last video. I'm hanging up the thing. I'm not doing anymore. And I was like, that's a pretty good April Fool's. How can I do better than that kind of thing?
Yeah.
So that's actually what led to me doing it. And then the irony was that Scott Reich actually went to CRIMECON, but I remember just thinking, I'm sure he would have liked to present as well, but probably it's not so easy just to get in. You know, you don't just put up your hand and they let you present. You've got to, you know, yeah. And the other thing that I sort of realized when Cotton Star sent me some clips, and also when you were there, I sort of realized going to CRIMECON and standing up and saying your thing, you might not necessarily have a friendly audience. In fact, a lot of the views we have on my channel, you are sometimes, I won't say the minority view, but they definitely, you get pushback, you know. And so it was quite weird looking at some of the people there, like Jim Clementi. When I saw kind of what he was saying, I was like, I'm not sure if I agree with that, and it can be quite daunting in a live audience for someone to kind of disagree with you. It's another thing where you've got the distance of social media, but if it's face to face and someone says, I mean, I was in that situation when I presented on Vincent van Gogh at a literary festival here in South Africa, and someone like came up to me and said, what did they say? Something like they insisted that he had bipolar, and it was like, okay, and like, what do you do with that? Like, okay, you're right, or maybe not, kind of thing. But yeah, it's definitely a bit of a challenge. Anyway, let's go through your John Ramsey experience, and we're going to go looking for, based on your notes, and then I might interrupt you now and then just to. Hey?
Are we going to start with the myths or the Ask Me Anything?
Where did I write this down? The myths.
I can tell you the feeling in the room was, to me, I would say 90% overwhelming support of, I don't know of what Mr. Ramsey and Ms. Paul Woodward were saying, or if it was just in support of them being there. But it was a very kind of just emotionally welcoming feeling in the room, which is good because I think it led the speakers to be comfortable to share what their message they went there to share was. But I also found like I feel like I was, and I was not rude. I was quiet. I actually didn't ask a question or say anything, but I felt like I was like shaking my head and rolling my eyes like this quite a few times. And I think I could be in my imagination, but I feel like I heard someone behind me going like, what is this woman's problem? Like, if you don't like it, get out, or something like that. Like, I got that feeling. So I kind of toned myself down. I was just like, I just took it all in because I didn't need to be there out like as I'm taking notes, but I was.
Yeah, I must say, you can almost imagine if you are too transparent, shaking your head and making grunting noises, you can actually be totally outnumbered by people that want to throw you out or whatever. So
no,
you can imagine.
I was quiet, but I was definitely visibly shaking my head. And my mom's like, what? And I'm like, oh, I'll tell you later. And it was actually the only time in a conference room after the show, there's like a little break room that you can go in. I had gotten myself a VIP pass so that I can have better seats, and that I had this area that I could go to decompress if I needed to. We were in there and we happened to be talking about the case. And as soon as I brought up my opinion on JonBenet Ramsey, it was like, that's not true. Why would you think that? They've been exonerated. And then my mom looked at me and we just kind of like moved on to like talk about something else. So it wasn't a very good discussion that I was able to have with the people that were at the table afterwards, just hanging out. So I didn't bring that up again.
So the aftermath of John Ramsey being at CRIMECON was that he went on Ashley Banfield, and you're not going to believe this, but News Nation actually contacted me. I don't quite remember the name of the lady who contacted me, but it was one of the producers or something of News Nation contacted me. I don't know if she thought I was there, but they were like, we want to get hold of John Ramsey, what have you taken here, whatever. And then the next thing I saw, John Ramsey interviewed by Ashley Banfield, and to be honest, I was really gobsmacked when she apologized directly to him. She was like, I'm sorry for everything you've gone through. And then she also said things like, she was like quite adamant. She was like, this is a DNA case. And she was also like, DNA has exonerated this family. And I was like, you know, we're not going to deal with that really so much here. We're not going to deal with that issue. But I just was quite like, okay, you know. But anyway, so let's deal with your notes and then go through the Ask Me Anything, which is pretty interesting as well.
Okay, so their session was about dispelling the myths, dispelling 25 years of myths with John Ramsey and Paula Woodward. And so Paula shared a myth, and then they both gave feedback of why that is a lie or why it's not true. So the first myth that, and this is not my words, this is what they said. They brought these things up. So some of them may be controversial, but I literally just was writing down what they said. Myth: JonBenet was strangled and then hit on the head 2 hours later. And Nick, if there's ones that you don't want me to talk about for, I don't know, for trigger or YouTube warning, you can let me know. Paula Woodward said the cause of death, according to the autopsy, is asphyxia by strangulation associated with craniocerebral trauma. The strangulation and head trauma were nearly simultaneous. So Paula Woodward said that the myth is that JonBenet had the garrote or the rope around her neck, and then the Boulder police, or I can't remember. She said the mayor or the Boulder police. They then reported that 2 hours later she was hit on the head. So she said that that's a myth, that it happened simultaneously, according to the coroner's in the autopsy report. Have you heard that as a myth? I haven't heard.
I think if I remember what I saw, maybe on the news or something, I think she was saying what the mayor said. But I must say, what I've seen a lot of people speculating on is that there was the head blow, and then Patsy staged the garrote, that the garrote was staged and all that kind of thing, which, sorry if I'm going to offend you, but I've always thought that's absurd. Like, this is your own child. You're not going to pull that garrote as tight as what they did. You know what I mean? I do think that JonBenet was changed. In other words, so there was some activity, you know, wiping her down and changing some of her clothing. But I really don't think. But anyway, there's some people who believe that, and so that might account for it, but in the opposite way. In other words, that the garrote was second and maybe an hour later, something like that. I must say, I've always believed and imagined it to be, you know, based on a very close reading of the autopsy, that it had to have been simultaneous, and they go together because of the minimal bleeding. The garrote would actually prevent a lot of blood from moving or circulating. You know, bear in mind that they didn't find any blood on, you know, it wasn't like there was any blood in JonBenet's hair, or it was only much later in the middle of the autopsy that they realized, wow, she's actually got this really big injury, right? And so in a way, you've almost got to think, how on earth would it be possible to what's the word, to absorb a blow like that, and then it doesn't break the skin. So in a weird way, I think the JonBenet Ramsey case is just that, in terms of that, the peculiarity of, I won't say what I think the object is, but the object that struck her not actually even breaking the skin and yet being a very devastating blow. So it's like a very serious injury, and yet it doesn't even break the skin. It's kind of a weird contradiction there, you know.
Nick, I'm noticing in chat that they're saying the background noise when I speak is really bad.
Oh. I can hear you fine.
I don't have any other tabs open or anything. So I'm not sure if it's something on your end you need to turn down or could turn down, or if I have to do something.
Is that better?
Is that better?
April says yes. So
okay. When I speak, I hear like muffling, but I don't know what it would be from. Sorry about that.
Robbie says it's still there. I'll try and I'll take my mic off while you're talking and see if that helps. Okay.
Okay. Is that better? Can you hear me better now when he turns his mic off? Testing. Oh, they said it's perfect when your mic is off. So are we continuing? Okay. The second myth is John Ramsey arranged to fly his private jet to Atlanta shortly after JonBenet was found. And John Ramsey said, "I didn't fly my private jet. I didn't own one, nor was I in any condition to fly one in the condition that I was in. Lockheed Martin sent a company airplane to take our family to Atlanta for JonBenet's funeral. Atlanta was home for us." Had you heard that as a myth before, Nick?
Sorry, I sort of tuned out a little bit there. I know that John Ramsey is a pilot. I think that's, I think in a weird way, the myths that they are talking about are sort of almost made worse or exaggerated in a way, because the fact is the officers on the scene heard John calling his pilot. So, you know, he wasn't going to fly himself out of Boulder. And also, yes, he didn't have his own plane, but he did have a plane, and he did have, what's the word? There was, I guess, a company plane from Lockheed Martin. And there was also a pilot. He had his own kind of personal pilot, almost like a chauffeur. And what, you know, like if I was at CRIMECON and they'd sort of said, yeah, this is a myth, blah, 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 I would have sort of put my hand up. No one would have acknowledged it, but I would sort of put my hand up and said, yes, but you did call your pilot, didn't you? And that is something that's sort of mentioned, I think, in his book, The Death of Innocence, and it's also mentioned in Steve Thomas's book. You know, I don't think it's that aspect's not a myth. And their question was, why on earth do you want to leave now? Like, you know, and as far as I know, he called his pilot twice. He called the pilot once to sort of say, I think it was like, get ready, could be wrong. And then the second time, well, something else. But yeah, the pilot's name was Mike Archuleta, and the pilot's wife was actually a really good friend of Patsy's, and her name was Pam, and she actually wrote a book, and she appeared in the Dateline documentary of 2016, I think, on the 20th anniversary. So you've got to like be fair and say, okay, well, he didn't have his own plane and he wasn't going to fly it himself, but That myth didn't come out of nowhere, you know.
Are you
there?
gonna mute?
Yeah, I'm muting you.
Okay, sorry. Myth: the Ramseys didn't act right. John Ramsey responded, "I don't know how you're supposed to act. We were criticized for calling the police because the ransom note said not to call the police. We arranged for the ransom money. The note said, we'll call you tomorrow, but I didn't know if tomorrow was tomorrow or the day we were in. When 10:30 came and passed, the police said, John didn't cry. It's ridiculous reasoning about the phone call because I didn't know what day the perpetrator meant. I thought it shouldn't matter. It should be on your radar that 10:30, regardless of what day." But he was trying to spin it that he wasn't upset because he wasn't showing true emotion because he didn't know what the writer of the ransom note meant. I thought that was weird.
Yeah, so on the first thing, I must say, I've obviously written quite a few books on the JonBenet Ramsey case, and to be honest, a lot of what I see here, I've seen many times. I've seen him say the same thing in interviews and repeat it in books. So it's the same, it's like nothing new. When you say something like, I don't know how you're supposed to act, that to me is a really interesting statement, because I think if you think about the Chris Watts case, when Tammy Lee said to him, you have not shed one tear. And then what obviously is happening in that situation is like, well, how am I supposed to act? Well, it is about acting. It is a performance. It is trying to convince someone that either your nonchalance means that you're innocent, or that you're, what's the word? What the opposite of nonchalance means that, what is happening means you're innocent. The thing that, whether John says, I don't know how you're supposed to act, you got a sense, I think the officers that were on scene, Rick French, and I think there's another one with quite a funny name, they kind of very early on said, these people aren't acting right. And you kind of had almost John and Patsy being opposites. Patsy was hysterical, and she was crying with her hands in front of her face and looking through her hands like that, right? Remember that? Hello?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And that was even depicted in the Lifetime movie. And then you had John, who was the opposite. And the other thing that was weird was they were never in the same room. He wasn't comforting her. They weren't really talking to each other. I'm trying to think what the other thing was. Yeah, just things like, shouldn't you go and look, through the house kind of thing. Another thing that just to me is really basic is your daughter's missing, and the clue, the major clue, is the ransom note. Aren't you going to pick up the ransom note, read the ransom note, reread the ransom note, read again, try and figure something out from it? And yet one of the sort of things that emerges when you know this case really well is that it appears that neither of them ever touched the ransom note. There were no fingerprints on that ransom note from anyone except eventually the document examiner. And that, like you ask someone, okay, so you read the ransom note. Yeah, how did you read it? Without touching it. So if you say, I don't know how you're supposed to act, and then you talk about the ransom note, well, I'll tell you how you're supposed to act. You're supposed to pick up the ransom note and read it. I would imagine. And in John's story, or maybe it's Patsy's story of what John does, he's like in his underwear and he's sort of on all fours and he's reading the ransom note, like all 3 pages are like that, and he's sort of on all fours and he's reading it without touching it. It's like, when you like look at John, you're like, I can't actually even imagine that. I can't actually imagine that happening. And that's
You
the story.
expect his fingerprints to be on it. You expect their fingerprints to be on it.
And you can take that a bit further and you can say, maybe they'd read it earlier, but this is the part that's interesting. When the officer comes in, they don't like approach the officer or intercept the officer and give him the ransom note and say, this is what we got. They sort of usher him in and they sort of direct him and they say, there's the ransom note and there it is on the floor. And it's like, so, you know what I mean? Like you would imagine someone would have picked it up and then handed it to him and everyone's reading it. And the officer doesn't even seem to pick it up. So it's like weird. It's like there's the ransom note, but no one's gonna, yeah. Okay. I'll go mute again.
Next myth, John was casually going through the mail. John responds, we had a slot mail. It goes through our door, and I was looking for another communication from the kidnapper. The police should have been doing that. Yet they interpreted my going through the mail as casually going through my bills.
Not much commentary about that, except are you seriously suggesting that the kidnapper left a 3-page ransom note and they were going to mail you as well? In other words, they were going to mail you in advance and the mail had already arrived. And that was sort of coordinated as well. It just seems a very odd thing. You've gotten the ransom note, so why on earth do you have to go look through the mail? Look at the ransom note. That's how I see it.
Okay.
I think sorry to interrupt. I think the issue that the cops had was that there didn't seem to be any urgency. The time came and went, nothing happened. John seemed to be sitting around. Everyone seemed to be waiting, but there didn't seem to be really kind of any urgency. And then everyone was like looking at everyone else, kind of like, what you're going to do, and then Linda Orange said, maybe you should go and look around the house.
Yeah, the first half of their myths, to me, if I had only time to share a few myths on the murder of my daughter's case, I wouldn't have really focused on the mail. That I was checking mail. Like that wouldn't have been my top myth to break. But they do share some more pertinent ones coming up now. The next one is Patsy wrote the ransom note. And Paula Woodward responded for this one. She said, there were at least 30 other people more likely than Patsy to have written the ransom note. John scored 5 out of 5 and was able to be ruled out, one being the most likely to have written the note. And Patsy scored a 4.5, so she was not ruled out. I had never heard about these other 30 people more likely to have written the ransom note. But you also have to take into consideration of where the ransom note was written, what it was written with, how it was written, the tone, not just the specific handwriting analysis. So I thought I was surprised to find that out. And I also remember just thinking in my mind, well, didn't Patsy and John give multiple samples? And I remember something about them using the one that they were the most pleased with the results. Is that, I don't want to make a myth, but I remember maybe from even one of your going through the case, for some reason, I remember them not being satisfied and going to all these different people and saying, well, you analyze my writing, you analyze, and then they took the analysis that they most approved of and presented that.
Yeah, I think the clearer picture, the fuller context is, and again, this is how I understand it, it was their experts that basically assessed John as 5 out of 5 ruled out. I don't have a problem with that. But it was also their experts, their hand-chosen 4 or 5 handwriting experts that basically said 4 out of 5, Patsy isn't ruled out, but she virtually is. And if you can accept that, you can say, oh, okay, so that's the situation. But there's a guy called Chet Ubowski from the CBI and quite a few others who said other things, and you never hear about those people. So I think if you're talking about myths, you're going to talk about what is the full picture about what all the experts said about the handwriting. And the answer is Team Ramsey's experts said, predictably, definitely wasn't John and probably wasn't Patsy. And then other experts, kind of, let's say, law enforcement experts, didn't say that. And yeah, I mean, you can take it even further. You can take it a lot further. The contents of the note, how it was written. Also, what did the housekeeper think about the handwriting? Not just the style of the handwriting, but also things like the excessive use of exclamation marks. You know, something I dealt with in my writing is the pageantry of the Ransom Note, just the drama of it, the floweriness of it. It was just very dramatic, and a lot of people said this. Not only is this like the War and Peace of Ransom Notes, but it feels like it's like lines out of movies. And I actually made a video where the entire Ransom Note was reduced to lines out of movies, and you can actually do that. You might think you can only make little pieces here and there, but you can actually almost reduce the entire Ransom Note to movie things coming out of movies. It's actually quite shocking. It's quite shocking. The other thing that I think is very important to address here is someone, you know, there may have been a majority of people supporting the Ramseys, but someone actually queried this particular question. And I thought it was quite interesting the way that sort of came up and the way that was addressed, but we'll deal with that. We'll deal with that later. Okay, I'm going to mute myself.
Okay, the next myth, there were no signs of forced entry. And Paula answers this. She says there were at least 8 signs documented of forced entry, including an open window, a number of broken windows and doors, a suitcase under a window, and a scratch on the wall. Those are what she says are some of the 8 signs of the documented forced entry to me, which doesn't seem very compelling. I don't know.
To me, if you wanted to dispel a myth, then, well, can you answer this, Stephanie? You were in the room. Did they show images of these 8 documented things of forced entry?
No.
So if you really wanted to be clear, you would say, you know what? People have said there were no signs of forced entry. There were 8, and these are them. Picture of that, 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 right?
She didn't actually give us 8.
Yeah, I mean, even saying, you know, like she's just said there were 30 other people other than Patsy. Can you name 1? Can you name 5? Who are these people? How come we've never heard of them anywhere? How come they're not on Loosmith's suspect list, kind of thing? But anyway, so 8 signs of documented forced entry. List them. Let's get a list of them. From what I remember, there was the basement window that you could sort of say. I really don't know how you can say a suitcase under a window is a sign of forced entry. That's a sign of how the entry was potentially done, but that's, you can't use that to say that's number 7 or whatever, or that a scratch on the wall is a sign of forced entry. So I think you want to be quite explicit with these numbers.
Scratch on a wall could be from anything.
Yeah. A number of broken windows. I know of one broken window. What were the other broken windows?
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. The next one that John committed SA on JonBenet, and Paul Woodward said it has been reported, including by JonBenet's own pediatrician, that there was no history of prior SA. And John then responds, there was unidentified foreign male DNA found on JonBenet's clothing. Why they wouldn't test it, I don't know. And then he goes on to say, it'd be in their best interest to test it. Find out that it belongs to one of Burke's little friends that happened to be there. Or I thought that was so weird. And then after his or, then he started talking about how rather than test the DNA, they sent them to Paris or overseas to go to a factory, or China, to go to a factory to find an American that worked in the factory on the type of undergarments that JonBenet had on. And he was saying, why would you do that? Why would you be going there to find this American in their factory to find his DNA? He said, you should just test what we have here. That was what his point was. But I thought it was really odd how he said, it came out of his mouth, find out that it belongs to one of Burke's little friends that happened to be there. He said that. I thought that was weird. I mean, yes, maybe because they play, but would it be on her undergarments? I would hope not.
Yeah, I'm not going to really respond to that, but I do think it's definitely interesting. I think it's worth mentioning that it's been disputed, conjectured, speculated that I think one of the arguments was that JonBenet was suffering from vaginitis, but there definitely was signs of inflammation, and there definitely was some strange idiosyncratic bruising / injury / whatever that indicated something was going on, that certainly it warranted a mention in the autopsy. And you can go further talking about the hymen and all that kind of thing. So I don't know whether you can say in an absolute way and in a definitive way about there being no history of that. But, well, there it is. That is something that is, that's quite a good one to bring up as a myth. But I do agree that a lot of people are very convinced that John was the perpetrator in terms of that, and I don't see that at all. But I do think that is a myth. John being, to be honest, when I researched this, that was my first thought. My first thought was, I'm just trying to think. I think because I wrote my books with Lisa Wilson, and my first thought, my first thought was John did it. Then I think Lisa believed that Patsy did it. Then I went from John believing John did it to Patsy did it, and then and I think it's almost like levels when you get to know the case you go, I don't know if you did the same thing, you sort of go from the one to the other, and then as your knowledge base increases, you maybe move to another person. Of course, if you projecting, then you're going to just be projecting to a particular person. So, if you grew up with a let's say a very domineering, nasty mother, like just I don't know, and maybe you've got a feelings of resentment towards your mom or to I don't know, then you might see in a JonBenet Ramsey case the person you want to see, So what was your, you don't have to go into too much detail, but did you sort of first think it was a particular person, then think it was someone else?
I think this case happened when I was in high school, and when I learned about it, I was like, there's no way the family is involved in any way. And I was interested in true crime then. And even in college, I began reading about the case, and I thought, it's an intruder. It's someone who worked on their house, that knew the ins and outs, that made their way, and it was an intruder. Then I began to believe it was people closer to JonBenet that lived in the house.
Okay.
So I had a big, and I do remember actually speaking with my mom in the kitchen when they were exonerated by Mary Lacey. My mom was cooking dinner. And I remember I said to her, oh my gosh, thank goodness. I was like, I knew it. I knew it. Thank goodness they're exonerated. Mom, this, like, I feel so much better. I couldn't imagine, that. And now here I am, and I'm like, well, wasn't the whole truth.
I just want to respond to Mavanka. Mavanka says, wasn't it snowing that evening and no evidence of footsteps? So Mavanka, to me, like in theory, the entire Ramsey case could have been, let's not say solved, but simplified from the word go if that aspect had been absolutely clarified. So in other words, if there are no footprints in the snow around the house and the house is surrounded by snow, then it just cannot have been an intruder. And then people will say, well, look, there are footprints in the snow. But there are other areas where well, let me put it this way. The first officer on the scene made the observation that he didn't see any footprints. Now, why would he say that? So now do you say the officer didn't look right? But you nevertheless have someone from law enforcement making that observation, right? Then you can make the argument that Lou Smith made, which is that actually there was no snow. So why would an officer say there were no footprints in the snow if there was no snow? And so even if you take that argument, I did go and study the weather history, and there was trace amounts of snow. There was a little bit of snow that fell, and that night was particularly cold, which I think is quite important. But even if you don't have snow, you can have frost, and frost is the same thing of creates like a carpet or a tapestry of crystals. And whether you walk on snow or frost, it's the same thing. If you walk on it, you're going to see footprints there. And you might say, yes, but you don't get frost on paving. Yes, you do. When it's very cold, you definitely do. That kind of frost covers everything. And the officer arrived before the sun came up, so it was still very, very cold. And I've always thought a great way to test all of this is you go to the Ramsey house around about that time of the year, and all you do is you look at the ground. You just look at what does the ground look like. under similar conditions. Is there frost or not? Right, you could do something like that. What is the other thing? Okay, I'm not going to say much more than that. Stephanie, go on.
Okay. I will say in regards to the snow, Paulo said that there was no snow on the south, and I don't know if it was eastern side, but she said there was no snow on that side of the house. So there were no footprints. That's what she said. There would be no footprints. The last myth that they shared for their presentation was.
Can I interrupt quick? So I wrote a couple of books on this, and I really went into that particular question quite deeply. In fact, I even got my sister, who's an architect, to do sun and shadow movements and to get a sense of where you would get shadow, and studied a lot of photos, trying to get hold of all the photos. And I actually found 2 or 3 photos where you actually do see snow there, and you actually see footprints in the snow there as well. So to make this blanket statement that there was no snow, when you actually see photos of it, it could be a case that the photo was taken the next day or something. That's not my impression. Those look like crime scene photos. Those photos sort of look the same. If you take that one photo that Lou Smith identified, where he said, look at the paving, there's absolutely no snow here. Well, what time was that photo taken? Nobody talks about that. It's like common sense. Sometimes snow early in the day is visible, and then that same snow later on in the day has melted. So you can't say when the snow is melted, there was no snow to begin with. You've got to contextualize and say, well, what was the temperature? What is the time? And see it like that. And so, obviously in a situation like this where they've only got 50 minutes, they don't go into details like that. And so it's very black and white, very simple. And none of the nuances are there. Anyway, let's go on.
Actually, when Paula Woodward had said that, I was at that moment in my phone looking for the photo from, I think it might have been, I couldn't remember if it was a Patreon post or if it was on YouTube and one of the episodes you had done. And I was going there and I found it and I showed my mom, because I was like, that was one of those times where I was shaking my head, was what this whole footprints in the snow stuff. So, okay. The last myth they shared in their 50-minute session was,
you should have held your phone up, like in the crowd, like,
I probably would have gotten it snatched and they would have said I was recording or something. Burke killed JonBenet. That's a myth that they shared. That was the last one that they shared. John Ramsey said, it was said that Burke's voice could be heard at the end of Patsy's 911 call. That was a lie. An analysis of the 911 tape concluded that there was no voice on the tape. It was indiscernible. Lord knows there were times Burke should have popped her a good one, but he didn't. And at this point, he starts laughing, and so does some of the audience. And I just found that appalling. Like, I didn't think that was, for me, appropriate to make light of. I just didn't find it funny. After the show on CBS aired, even the Boulder Authority said, if you need help going after CBS, we will help. That is below any standard of journalism. So even to me, I'm just like, he's saying it's a lie, that the voice was analyzed, but that it was indiscernible. Doesn't mean there wasn't one there. It means some people had trouble deciphering who or what was said. Not that it doesn't exist.
Well, again, I think the best counter to that is to talk to Kimberly Archuleta, and obviously she's not a family, she's not related to the pilot, Mike Archuleta. But anyway, Kimberly Archuleta, she broke her silence eventually on the in that Dateline documentary on the 20th anniversary in 2016. And she was actually in tears. She was like, no one came to talk to me, and you know, this has changed my whole life. And you know, I felt like I knew something. And anyway, in her words, what she said was that she heard three voices. She said she heard a man's voice, she heard a woman's voice, and she heard a third voice. And that is not so. In other words, you can look at you can figure this out two ways. The one is you can play the recording and ask yourself, do you hear something, yes or no? Do you hear something or not? And then the other side of it is the operator, who's your best witness really, said that she did, right? And it's significant this, that Burke himself was actually asked, you know, where were you and whatever. And what's quite interesting is this idea of, I think it was speculated in that CBS documentary. This part I thought was a little bit overdone, because when you can't hear something and you hear noise and whatever, where do you draw the line between what you think you're hearing and what you are actually hearing? But I think somebody said that they thought they heard Patsy saying, help me, Jesus, which I think sounds like it could be Patsy. And then someone else saying, what have you done? And this sounded like it could have been a male's voice or something like that. But it's not even as though the sound was so poor that I mean, it's to that extent that people spoke about it. But to me, all the analysis fails in comparison to what the call operator herself said. That to me is quite interesting. I don't know why the police didn't speak to her more than they did. That to me is a bit odd. Maybe they weren't allowed to, I don't know.
The myth that they listed was Burke killed JonBenet. Why is the blurb all about the 911 call? That doesn't make sense to me. I don't know. I know people thought it was him, but that's not, I feel like they could have said something more to disprove the myth than there was no voice on the 911 call. So the next is the Ask Me Anything, and I don't know how long we've been going. If you want me to continue with the questions from the audience. Okay. So the question, these were from the audience members. Anybody could come up to the microphone and ask a question. And the first question that was asked was, do you have any happy memories that aren't tainted by the media? Those of you that are on Patreon, you've seen this because Nick did post this previously, if you wanted to follow along or just listen in. And then John answered, I have solid memories of JonBenet as a 6-year-old, a bit of a tomboy. I can't imagine JonBenet grown up, but that's okay. I remember her as a wonderful little girl. I'm glad she was in my life. And I couldn't believe, no matter how much time goes by, that for lack of better words, I can't imagine her grown up, but that's okay. That would never be okay. That would never be okay with me. I just thought that was very generic response. It didn't really give any specific memories of her. It was more just, she's not here and I remember her as a 6-year-old tomboy. That was his memories that aren't tainted by the media.
Yeah, that's a tough one. Again, to me, it's just, I've heard John say before, it's almost like he has a formula response for some of these questions. But to be honest, you know, my mom died when I was 17. I don't know if I've imagined her as an older person. I guess there have been times where I've wished she was there to talk to or whatever. So in a way, it's a little bit of a difficult one. I don't know how much one does, you know, if you know and you've accepted that someone has died, I guess you do. The thing that is a little bit strange is, you know, in the Madeleine McCann case, also to some extent the JonBenet Ramsey case, the media and the public sort of imagine that help. You know what I mean? There's sort of just not a lot of it going on, but there's certainly acknowledgement that the rest of that life has been extinguished. And John's saying he can't remember, he can't imagine her growing up, and that's okay. What's okay about that? Like, you know what I mean? To say that's okay, why is that okay?
Yeah, that didn't make sense to me, the being okay. Maybe he just was giving filler language. I don't know. The next question was, did you ever have anyone that was your main suspect? And he doesn't give a specific answer to this. He just says an evil, evil person. My attorney said, don't do a Boulder police on us, meaning don't rush to judgment. Lou Smith developed a database, and retired detectives that worked with him are still working behind the scenes and going through his list. And Paula Woodward said, the best way for this case to be solved is for the Boulder police to test the minuscule amount of DNA still remaining for genealogy. There's a petition that has been started to give the DNA to an independent agency. It is change.org/justice4JBR. And that was their main message, was to sign this petition to get this DNA tested. And you could see everybody in the audience, they had to repeat it several times, going on their phone and signing the petition. So it's literally started the day before CRIMECON or at CRIMECON, and by the end of CRIMECON, they had the first sufficient amount of signatures.
Okay, so I think it's quite an interesting answer he gives with, did you ever have anyone that was your main suspect? Because when the cops asked them on the scene on the day after Christmas, on that morning, both John and Patsy gave very specific, that they said, Patsy kind of implicated or suggested the housekeeper, Linda Hoffman Pugh. That was Patsy's hunch, I guess. And John said he thought it was someone from work, a disgruntled co-worker. I'm not sure if it was Jeff Merrick, but it was someone that was specifically mentioned. So, and that didn't stop there. There were many people that were mentioned specifically. In fact, when you go through the police interview, this is brought up again. You know, who do you think might have done this? And then I think it's also brought up specifically that it could have been Santa Claus, as absurd as that is. So what I find quite interesting here, and then also, remember when it was the guy that eventually tried to sue, Chris, what is his surname? Chris, the photographer. I should know this. Let me just quickly Google it. Where's
photographer JonBenet?
Yeah.
Wolf?
That's it.
Last name? Wolf?
Yeah, Wolf. So there was quite a specific reference to him, and I think that was actually in their book. So to be here on the stage and sort of say, did you ever have anyone that was your main suspect, and you can't name a name? I think you can't name a name because you could get sued if you do name a name, right? That's the reality here. But I think you've also got to be clear, people were named, and there were actually kind of lawsuits. Even Linda Hoffman-Pugh became quite litigious at a certain point. So it's quite interesting that he talks almost anonymously about a list. So, you know, you'd think, like, if you asked me, what suspects did the Ramseys have, I could answer that question. Well, I could roll off a couple of names, right? It's just strange that here in this setting that he doesn't do that. You'd think, haven't you thought of anyone that rises to the top, you know? And then the other thing that I think is quite interesting is, based on what I've read, based on what I've researched, it's not like the Boulder police are idiots, and it's not like it's this big mystery. The situation is, there is this tiny amount of DNA. Paula Woodward's right about that. But if they do test that DNA, they will then destroy that DNA. So the moment that they test this DNA, it will be destroyed. And if you're not quite sure what that means, like if you think, okay, is that such a big deal? Does anyone know where the Ramsey ransom note is today? Is it like in some true crime museum? Is the Ramsey ransom note, like, where is it? Does anyone know? And the answer is, it was destroyed. It was destroyed by the type of processing that was used to determine, I'm not sure what it was, DNA or fingerprints. So they put it into some kind of whatever, and so the Ramsey ransom note today doesn't exist because it was destroyed. And now and that's, to me, a pity. It's a pity, because who knows if they still had that, what they could determine from that. A very tiny micro fibers and things like that. In terms of the DNA, what they're saying is, we do actually want to test it, but we want to wait even longer, so that when we do test it and we are going to destroy it, our chances of finding something are better or guaranteed. So the situation, as I understand it here, is John Ramsey and Paula Woodward are sort of trying to rush it. They're trying to say, and this is what I don't understand, 25 years have gone by, but no, we must do it right now. What's the difference going to be if it's done next year or the year after? And you might say, what a careless, callous, reckless thing to say. Don't you want justice in this case? Well, maybe we need to be careful in terms of that. Maybe we do need to, if we're going to destroy this last vestige of evidence, maybe we need to allow technology to race ahead for a while. And it is the folks who know their DNA technology that are saying that's what they want to do. They want to give the technology even more time, so that this last precious piece of evidence can be properly analyzed. And so that's the other side of that story as well. There's another side to that story. Okay.
The next question from the audience, she came up and said, wasn't Santa going to come visit her? Has he been eliminated as a suspect? And John Ramsey says, I don't know. We later learned he left town and went to London. He died in 2004. Paula says, well, he was not physically capable of hurting JonBenet so badly because he had a very serious heart condition. And then John said he and his wife wrote a fiction book that paralleled what happened to their family. And I think he means their own family, the Santa's family, right? That's what I think. And then Paula was like his DNA was tested and came out negative, because it was coming across that John, at least to me in the audience, still considered him a suspect. And then finally Paula was like, oh, he's not that strong. And finally she was like, okay, I got to stop this. And she said his DNA was tested and it came out negative. And John Ramsey said, oh, okay, I didn't know that. And I'm like, you should know that. You should know that. You should know who's ruled out and make sure your list is right. He was, I don't know.
That kind of thing reminds me of when, I'm trying to think when it was it 2017? But anyway, John Ramsey was confronted in a CNN special by a CNN reporter on the indictments, the grand jury indictments, and the CNN person said something about, what about accessory? And then he said something like, I don't even know what that word means. And then she explained it to him. And then I think he also said, oh, I didn't know that. And it's just like, again, you've got to, it's like, it is a sort of biggest belief. And yeah, you have John, not, like someone saying, has Santa been eliminated as a suspect? 25 years later, him saying, I don't know. Then someone's got to tell him, oh, his DNA was tested, it came out negative. Oh, I didn't know that.
It looked really bad. It looked really bad.
Yeah.
I thought. Okay.
Yeah.
The next question says, you said you subscribed, because before he said he had subscribed to John E. Douglas's theory, which I thought subscribe was a kind of odd word to use. He subscribes to the John E. Douglas theory. But why JonBenet being targeted versus Burke being not being targeted? And he gives an answer. And again, you can listen. It doesn't really answer the question why JonBenet and not Burke, but this was his answer. Lou Smith thought it was a kidnapping gone wrong, and someone pointed out to me yesterday, that was at CRIMECON, that's not really in conflict with John Douglas's theory that someone wanted to hurt me. I never thought about that. I don't know why they didn't kill me if they wanted to hurt me, because that would have been better. My attorney said you cannot hire someone to kill a child because they wouldn't last 2 weeks in prison. And then Paula chimes in and she says, the most abused people in prison are child abusers. I don't think that answered the question of why JonBenet was targeted and not. I mean, maybe he doesn't know, but he didn't say that. He just went on about Lou Smith's list and John Douglas's theory. Yeah, any comment about that one? Or I don't think that answered the question.
You would have imagined that the pageants would have come up, that she was a child beauty queen, and that would have come up. I think that is very relevant to why what happened to JonBenet did happen to JonBenet, to be honest. If JonBenet wasn't in those pageants, yeah. Okay, I'm not going to, you can go on to the next one.
Okay. How were you able to protect Burke and shield him from the media? John Ramsey answers, it was difficult. We were frightened for Burke's life. We'd put him on the floor of the back seat of the car. One of our friends would be a decoy and leave the home. Then we'd go the other way. His school had even set up a Burke watch and would have a call button if needed as they watched him in school. Keeping Burke safe and out of the media was a distraction, maybe a good thing because it got us doing something.
So what I found quite interesting in my research was that the authorities offered to provide security for Burke, basically to, bring him home from school or whatever. And what is really interesting now, just think about this. I always talk about the post-meditation side of true crime. It sounds like a silly word, but the thinking that goes into the aftermath of an incident. And you've got to think, does that make sense, right? And so in terms of this case, your one child is supposedly being kidnapped or being killed, but within and there's this person out there who didn't get satisfaction. They didn't get the money, they didn't get whatever they wanted. So why would they not come back if they didn't get what they wanted? And also you didn't listen to what they said in the note, right? Why wouldn't there be this? I mean, even Patsy said, there's someone out there, right? So if Patsy said that, then why wouldn't you think that and do something about that? And so the obvious thing to do would be to, it's this high profile case. So, and then you say, you know what, I'm going to send my son back to school. He's just going to carry on with school as though nothing's happened. Really? Okay. Well, then, if he's going back to school, don't you want additional security? No, we don't want additional security. And so what they actually did was the school kind of said, don't worry, we'll be responsible for the security. Oh, that's good enough for us. Oh, okay. And I mean, he says it, his school set up a Burke watch. So are you really kind of going to be like in a situation of one of our children has been, this has happened to one of our kids, and now we'll just have the school look after the other one? Okay. I mean, what harm is it going to do to actually have law enforcement as another layer? You could just literally have them say, yes, no, they can just be on the scene and whatever. No, we don't want you there. The school will take care of it. The other thing that I think you've got to consider, right, using a little bit of critical thinking, is could there be another reason why you wouldn't want the police there? This is what I mean. What if you did have police? Oh, okay, yeah.
I have a thought. Maybe they don't want the police having access to their child because they're afraid of what their child might say without them around.
And so you could theoretically take that thing and say, on the one hand, maybe their son could say something that could get them into trouble when they're innocent, and so you wouldn't want that situation. You wouldn't want, they talk about out of the mouths of babes. You could say something like, I don't know, whatever. But the other side of it is the thing of, what if Burke did know something? And it turned out when he went on to Dr. Phil that he did know a couple of things. That he was out of bed when everyone thought that he was asleep. And that's huge, because it's like, so you were walking around the house when everyone was asleep. Did you see anything? We actually need to talk to you about this kind of thing. I'm just going to think of the other thing. Yeah. So that's the other aspect. And there is a very interesting thing. I think it's in Lawrence Schiller's book, Perfect Murder, Perfect Town, where he says, a mother overheard Burke and her son talking about JonBenet. And that is, I think, exactly what the concern was, that Burke could either be overheard saying something or Burke might be asked something. And that could complicate things. Bear in mind, the Ramseys didn't talk to the police for 4 months. And so if they didn't talk to the police, you can imagine they didn't want Burke to talk to them either. Could you just imagine that was their position? Okay.
Question: why was the ransom note signed SBTC, Saved by the Cross? John Ramsey says to refer to Psalm 118. I don't know what Psalm 118 says. And then he says, one of the suspects signed their yearbook with SBTC. Some thought it meant Subic Bay Training Center from when I was stationed in the Navy in the Philippines. It meant something to the killer, but I don't know what it means. Want me to go on to the next one? Or did you have something to share about that?
I'm just looking at Psalm 118. I'm not quite sure I don't know if it's supposed to say saved by the cross somewhere here. But anyway, so yeah, one question I think is definitely quite interesting is, if you imagine that one of the Ramseys wrote the ransom note, then I think another question that kind of comes up is, did another member of the family know about that? You know, so if one of the Ramseys did write the ransom note, did another member of the family know about that? Did the other member of the family supervise that? Did they contribute any ideas? And what's quite interesting here is this offering of ideas. What do you think SBTC could mean? Oh, it could be Psalm 118. It could be Subic Bay Training Center. And so, you know, on the other hand, you could say, well, all of this information has come through subsequently. Wonders at the time that this note was written, what was SBTC supposed to be? The thing that's quite interesting with the Ramseys were that they were, and I think they are, quite strong Christians, quite churchy folk. And so, I don't know, one wonders what relevance SBTC had either way. If I don't want to say too much more than that, but one wonders about that. Yeah.
Next question. First a comment, I guess. I want to thank you very much for letting us see the human side of John Ramsey, not the media side of John Ramsey. And John Ramsey responds, you all have been so uplifting for me. It's been a blessing to be here. It's just been wonderful. And then the same audience member says, honestly, how free do you feel now to go on living your life without being under a microscope? Do you feel like you can have everything normal? And John said, yes, we really do. Throughout the whole ordeal for us, people have been really wonderful to us. The media has been horrible. The police has been horrible. But people have been wonderful. They stop us in the streets, give us hugs, just overwhelming kindness, and it's been very uplifting. And certainly that's what it's been like here. He's referring to CRIMECON. Our house was surrounded by media for 24 hours a day for probably a couple of years. When we went to Atlanta, they were waiting for us to be arrested and capture it on live TV. Of course, it never happened. Then they got tired of that. Then they pooled resources. Paula Woodward begins to laugh out loud for some reason. It would be 6 channels, and then it wouldn't be 6 channels outside. It would be just one to get the coverage. There were some really incredible journalists we met. They're not all bad. And Paula Woodward chimes in, or good. That's true of any profession. That ended, and yeah, we feel totally normal. I've learned everyone's carrying a burden. It's not easy.
Yeah, so that's quite interesting. The question, do you feel like you can have everything normal. And then he says, yes, you really do. This is like a case that is reverberated around the world. It's like, if not, isn't it, wouldn't you say it's America's most famous case bar none? Like, it's the most famous true crime case in America, yeah. And so to say everything feels normal, like he's going to CRIMECON normal.
No.
Like, if you think about the Woodcocks, do you think going there is normal for them? Like, it's it's just part of normal life going to CRIMECON as someone who's involved in trying to find their grandson. Is that like a normal thing?
Yeah.
But
because it's just been wonderful. It's just been wonderful.
Yeah. The thing I want to highlight is he says media has been horrible, and like I can't remember when last the media was horrible in the JonBenet Ramsey case in terms of antagonistic. Immediately after CRIMECON, John was all over the news. And they were all saying what he wanted to say. He was saying that, in other words, he was interviewed on Fox News. He was interviewed by News Nation, and he was able to say on those stations, the Boulder police suck, and this needs to happen, and I'm happy about that. And in other words, he can say whatever he wants to say, and he's treated with respect, and he's treated as and so what's horrible about that, right? You know what I mean? So like, when last were the media horrible? So yeah, I don't really understand that. Maybe it means in the past, but certainly in the present, the media have been anything but supportive. I haven't really heard a dissenting media voice since the whole CBS thing. Have you? I mean, have you heard any dissenting counter-narrative type voice since, what was it, 2016?
And the other people that worked on the cases that were there, they didn't speak one bit about John Ramsey being there or what they actually thought about the case at all. Which I thought, oh, this might be interesting, because I knew what their views were, or at least what they were leaning towards, without saying it so they don't get sued, but there was not a mention of it. So that was interesting. And also the feeling that I got, and I don't know how other people felt, but for me, he kept saying how wonderful it was to be there, how great everyone has been, how kind. Like, he was kind of treated like celebrity status, people taking pictures with him, wanting his autograph, Paul Woodward having her book signed. And I was just like, oh, you cannot butter me up. I was just like, I felt like that's what they were trying to do, is just be over complimenting to the group to get to share their presentation without, I guess, negative feedback. That's what it felt like for me. The next question was actually asked from Trisha from Web Sleuths. She was there, and she brought up a point from their presentation. She said, 30 people matched the ransom note more than Patsy. I never heard that statistic, and I find it fascinating. I'd like to know where that came from. And Mr. Ramsey, you've told us you've gone broke because of this, and that's unfair in itself. You also said something years ago that you were going to spend your last dime to find this killer, to do what it took to find this killer. And I'm wondering if you could tell us what you've done. I know you had a foundation. And tell us what you've done to further the investigation. And then Paula jumps in because she's the one who brought up about the ransom note. And she answers, the information of the 30 people matching the ransom note more than Patsy came from a police detective on the scene, and it came out after the Vanity Fair article in the fall of 1997. The constant drumbeat of misinformation from Boulder police officers was that Patsy Ramsey matched the handwriting, was close to the handwriting, and a female wrote the handwriting. After the article came out that had so much information, one of the police detectives said, "We've tested approximately 70 people, and half of them are more likely than Patsy, and half of them have not been completely cleared." Patsy scored 5.5 out of 5 from 6 analysts, meaning she didn't write the note. Does that answer your question? And she was very snarky to this. It wasn't like, does that answer your question? It was not, it didn't sound very kind. And Trisha continued. She says, "Well, do you know who the police detective was? Because that should be out there." And Paula says, "There's a lot of things that should be out there. Yes, I know who it was, but it was sourced information." So I don't really know what that means. Like, if it means like she can't share it, it's sourced, but she didn't say who. She says, "Yes, I know." She knows it, so it must be true. But 5.5 out of 5, no matter how many analysts analyze, doesn't mean to me that she didn't write the note. But she says because it was 4.5 out of 5 from 6 analysts, it means she was excluded. She didn't write the note. That's not proof to me. I feel like it's almost misrepresenting data. Then John Ramsey answered.
Sorry to interrupt.
Oh, yeah.
I've just put a link in the chat to that Vanity Fair article. It was written in October 1997. It's titled "Missing Innocence." It was written by Anne Louise Bardak, and I thought it was an absolutely excellent article, one of the best articles on this case, bar none.
Is that the article she's referring to?
Yeah, that's the one she's referring to, yeah. I'm just trying to
Okay.
find what about the handwriting. Sorry, it's quite a long article. I'm just going through here. Well, it is long. Okay, yeah. Anyway, let me just react to something else. So when she says that one of the police detectives said, "We've tested approximately 70 people and half of them are more likely than Patsy and half," that's not saying 30 people. That's saying half of them could be 40 or 30, whatever. Exactly half of 70 is 35. So it seems like, or let me ask it as a question. Hasn't a little bit of license been used there to say 30 people had, better, were more likely to have written the ransom note than Patsy? And so where are those tests or things? Why have we never seen it? Like, it is quite bizarre that part of the narrative is completely missing, and it comes out here. What's the other thing?
She kept saying what fascinating information it was.
Yeah. So to me, this is quite interesting how you play it both ways. So on the one hand, the Boulder police suck. They're all to blame. They can't do anything right. I hate the Boulder police, whatever. And then, oh no, the Boulder, I presume the police detective is referring to a Boulder police detective. I mean, if you say one of the police detectives said, who else would it be than a Boulder police detective? But anyway, and so one assumes that that's where it came from. So now you're taking something from the Boulder police, who are supposedly no good or whatever, and using that to bolster your case. The other thing is, you really want to protect that source 25 years later. If it's a legitimate source, or if it's a legitimate comment, why wouldn't you want to say this person's name? And the person would say, yes, absolutely. 70 people said this, blah, 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 blah. To me, it's not quite hard to imagine who this could be, because there've always been Ramsey apologists from the Boulder police. There've always been, I think, is it Sergeant Wickman? But there've always been certain police officers who've been supportive of the Ramseys. So it wouldn't surprise me if it was one of those. But why would it be such a big deal to mention that? To me, the issue is, if you do mention it, you are going to have to
be accountable.
Yeah, you're going to have to say, well, based on that, and then what? Who are 70 people? To me, the ridiculous thing with the DNA, there are a lot of arguments to make in terms of the DNA, but specifically in terms of the actual testing that was done. And there's an excellent blog on Juror 13's website dealing with that. But I'm not going to go into that here. It talks about, in terms of the actual DNA analysis, who was excluded and who couldn't be excluded. But beyond that, surely what is like incontrovertible is the handwriting. So surely your best clue in this whole case is the handwriting. The perpetrators actually left their handwriting for you. So why are you running away from the ransom note and you want to go and find DNA? You've got the ransom note. Handwriting is idiosyncratic. So why don't you use the handwriting? Why isn't most of the conversation in the Ramsey case about the ransom note? Why don't the Ramseys themselves even talk about that? Why is it like, oh, there's the ransom note, we're not going to read it, and we're not going to even listen to it. We're not going to obey the instructions in it. So even the Ramseys don't take the ransom note seriously. What's up with that? Right? And I just find that a bit weird. The ransom note's excellent evidence. So use the ransom note as your, almost like your primary means to figure out who's responsible for this. And then it turns out, where was the ransom note written? Where did the materials come from? And on and on and on. What's quite interesting is I'm just trying to see where it was mentioned. Where was it mentioned that the ransom note writer was a female? Did you mention that?
Yeah, it was in their session. It was a myth.
Yeah, they're saying that was a myth. Yeah.
Yeah, it says the myth they were disputing was that Patsy wrote the note. They said it was a myth because there were at least 30 other people more likely than Patsy to have written the ransom note. Actually, no, it was in, I just read that. The constant drumbeat of misinformation from Boulder police officers was that Patsy Ramsey matched the handwriting, was close to the handwriting, and a female wrote the handwriting. So she's saying that's misinformation from the Boulder police officers. That's what she said. That's what Paula Woodward says.
So I'm just going to read, since Paula Woodward referred to this, I'm just going to read an extract from Vanity Fair. It's from an article titled Missing Innocence. There's a quote from that article. Prior to the Ramsey interviews, a show and tell presentation had been arranged by the Ramsey lawyers to convince Hunter that their clients had not written the ransom note. According to police reports, Patsy had given 2 accounts of the morning's events. Mrs. Ramsey told me that she had gone into JonBenet's room at about 5:45 to wake her up, Officer French wrote. Finding the room empty, she went down the spiral back stairs where she discovered the note. Later, she said she found the note on the spiral back stairs when she went down to make coffee and then ran to JonBenet's room. The note was written in upper and lowercase printed letters on paper torn from a legal pad found in the house. Also discovered on the pad was the practice note beginning Mr. and Mrs. Ramsey. Kidnappers, says Mr. McCreary, do not spend hours at a crime scene after murdering their victims composing letters. And then it goes on to say, another thing that was really interesting was the delay. There was a long delay in releasing the contents of the ransom note to the public. So a ransom note had been written, and you'd think, if I was in that position, if someone had broken into my home and they'd left a note behind, I'd be like, let's get this note out there. First thing, find out who wrote this. Can you recognize his handwriting? And do it as quickly as possible. Why on earth would you wait and delay and delay? Why on earth would you not want everyone to see it? Because it's your best evidence, right? Why would you not want to look and say, do you recognize this handwriting? Ask the public. Do you recognize this handwriting? Have you seen it anywhere? Do you know anyone who writes like this, right? And so why didn't that happen? And so this is a quote from the Vanity Fair article. Out of the 74 names submitted for testing, Patsy's handwriting was the only one that set off alarm bells. Now, do you remember what Paula Woodward said? That they tested 70 people and about half blah, blah, blah. Well, this is from Vanity Fair. Out of the 74 names submitted for testing, Patsy's handwriting was the only one that set off alarm bells, says an investigator closely involved with the testing of the ransom note. There are indications that the author of the ransom note is Patricia Ramsey, but the evidence falls short to support that as a definitive conclusion. Now, I remember someone making the argument, it was quite clever, that I don't know if it was Sina Wong, but the argument went like this. Do you think, or could it even have been Chet Ubowski? The argument went like this. Do you think Patricia Ramsey wrote the ransom note? And the writing analyst said, yes. What's the probability? And he said, 100%. I'm 100% that she wrote the ransom note. And then the argument was, you cannot be 100%, so you are excluded. In other words, as a handwriting expert, you can't be 100% certain, so your testimony is scrapped because you can't be 100% certain. How's that? So you the best that you
99.9. There's a 99.9. Oh man.
Yeah. I'm just trying to see if I can get something more. Yeah. So that's now changing what Paula said to 74 names. Now it's not 70 names. Now it's 74 names. So it's just quite interesting to go look at the actual details. Okay, do you want to continue?
Sure. Yeah, she didn't provide us with any links to the article like you did. So now John Ramsey is going to be responding to her question. Could you tell us what you've done to further the investigation? And first thing he talks about is, I guess he's giving a little advice about money. Give your checkbook to a trusted friend and don't give out anything unless they approve it, because you make bad decisions. You sell your house, you quit your job. What we've done, we've offered the police to fund their familial DNA testing. Of course they declined. Lou Smith's daughter took Lou's database of information, and several of his retired detective friends worked these names, these leads, and have been for the past 6 years. They're continuing at it, and they have a GoFundMe page set up to pay for DNA testing. Mike, who was at the home we stayed at early on, hired 2 attorneys, and that's where the attorneys came from. He was an attorney himself and had worked in the district attorney's office in Boulder. Anyway, he helped me get some work in Utah. We've been there for 10 years and we rebuilt our lives. We had a reward early on. The police would not post it. And in my mind, that's still a valid offer and a $100,000 reward. So I guess what he's doing is he's keeping his offer for a reward still. The Lou Smith's detective friends are continuing to go through the list. I don't know how many more years, if it's been 6 years, it'll take. They're continuing at it. And for some reason, he throws in someone by the first name of Mike who hired attorneys for him and who had happened to work in the district attorney's office in Boulder. That's interesting.
Mike Bynum. That's Mike Bynum.
They stayed at a house with him.
For a very short while. Yeah.
That seems like it could be a conflict of interest.
Well, it was his friend and his lawyer, but then the lawyer handed him over to other lawyers. Yeah. So, for those who are interested, if you scroll down to just before halfway through that Vanity Fair article, there is a section dealing with Dr. Cyril Wecht, a well-known forensic pathologist, and he talks about having no doubt, blah, 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 blah. And you can see where there's the other side to that mythology, I guess. But if you haven't read that Vanity Fair article, it's really worth going through. It would probably take you maybe an hour or two to get through everything. But what's so amazing about this article is when it was written, October 3rd, 1997, which is why the details in it are so rich with detail, because it was written so close to the events at hand. Long enough to have gathered a lot of information, short enough to be still very relevant and what's the word? Yeah, just like if there's a smoking gun, the smoke's still coming out the gun sort of scenario. And now we go into the next question. 8 points of entry.
Okay. Yesterday, Paula, you spoke of 8 possible points of entry. So people are intrigued by this. She says, the mayor said no signs of forced entry. That was incorrect. That was a lie. She was fed that information from the chief of the then Boulder Police. There was an open door, unlocked windows, pry marks on a door that wasn't used very often, a broken outside light bulb, a suitcase in the basement next to the open window, debris from the open window, in the room where JonBenet's body was found, but she doesn't say what the forced entry was there, in a northeastern basement bathroom, and other unlocked doors. And I think other pry marks they think were old. There are 110 doors and windows, and about 75% of them open to the outside. So she doesn't seem to be very prepared with precise notes.
So again, I think you've got to be explicit when you say pry marks on a door that wasn't used very often. You should maybe you should show a photo of this door and also these marks. To me, those marks look like could be something like Burke doing whittling or someone. In other words, is that somebody trying to break into a door, or is it someone sort of I don't know, defacing part of the door? Because there's a difference between wood damage on a door as a result of like burglar type pry marks or whatever, and other mechanical damage to a door that might be something else. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Yeah.
Sometimes you have penetrative damage to a door, and sometimes it's not. There's a difference.
Yeah, you can't rule out the kids just from playing making marks. My son has a hoverboard and he's knocked into the wall before, and they leave marks. I mean, I don't know that I call them pry marks.
So what's also quite interesting is the 8 points of entry are brought up again and again. They're not really enumerated. It's not like number 1, this, number 2, that, number 3, that, number 4, that, or even just showing pictures. That's not done. Again, I don't know if you can say debris from the open window means that's a point of entry. There's debris there anyway. How is a suitcase sign of a point of entry? It's actually supposed to be forced entry anyway. A broken outside light bulb. The other thing that I think you've got to bear in mind is typically when someone breaks and enters, all the evidence is there. So there might be footprints outside the window, then the window's broken, then on the other side of the window there's something. So I don't know if you can say at that point there in the house there's a broken light bulb, over there was something, well, you know what I mean? It's not taking you anywhere, right? You know what I mean? I think what they're just trying to say is there was a lot of indications that there was forced entry. It had to have been an intruder kind of thing. The counter to that is the story that there was snow surrounding the house. The officer even mentioned it, that there were no footprints in the snow. And yeah, just the unlikely thing of why would someone break into a home where the whole family was present on Christmas? And I mean, you have the added threat that the kids are hanging around and the kids are playing with their gifts. At what point are you going to go into the house where the kids are all asleep on Christmas night? You know?
Yeah, it's not the smartest night.
Okay, next one.
What are your views now on pageants and the safety of children? John Ramsey responds, people accuse Patsy of dragging JonBenet to these things, but it was the other way around. They were just having fun. As a father, I didn't quite frankly care for it. And I didn't say anything because Patsy had just come out of remission from stage 4 ovarian cancer. And I think she was trying to pack in a lot of mother-daughter time and what she probably realized might not last as she would have hoped. And of course, it didn't. I used to complain about Patsy spending money. After she went through this cancer, I never brought that up again. And then he laughs. Yeah, that's never going to be discussed because I wanted her to enjoy life. When JonBenet was 5 years old, she took her with her friends and their 15 and 16-year-olds to New York City, probably because she didn't think she'd be there when JonBenet was that age. She accelerated and packed in a lot of things. We learned after the fact that there were some people there that probably shouldn't have been. In retrospect, I wouldn't have allowed that, even though Patsy had a different circumstance than most mothers. We were naive. We thought we were safe living in an Ozzie and Harriet type of neighborhood. We thought we were in a safe place, but there are bad people everywhere. They're not just in New York City or South LA. They're everywhere. Keep your home safe while you are asleep. You're pretty vulnerable, so be sure it's locked and secured so you can sleep peacefully.
Okay, so let's go on to me, the most significant question. I don't know, to me, wasn't that quite a shock when Jim Clemente spoke for you?
Oh, the next one? Yeah. Oh, yeah. I don't think it registered at first to John, who was speaking to him, because all the people on the stage kept saying they can't see who's in the audience because of the lights being so bright. So I don't know that at first it registered with him until Jim started revealing things about himself through his question. So it's interesting.
Yeah.
Want me to read that one now? Or you want to say anything on the beauty pageants?
I just want to say that I thought Jim was very clever in the way he did this. He was very sort of put John at ease, but he nevertheless asked a difficult question. In a way, I thought Trisha did the same thing. I don't know if you didn't Trisha also start off sympathizing and being very conciliatory in a way, and so that kind of puts him at ease, and then asks quite a tough question, right? Wasn't that your impression?
It was, yes. Yeah. I think that they were respectful, and I think that their questions came from the heart. I think that they came from the heart. Can you still hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. And how do you?
I'm gonna, as you deal with this question, I'm gonna turn off my mic and cam, so everyone has your full attention. Okay.
Oh, okay.
This is gonna be just you.
Okay. Okay. Ready? I'm waiting. John, I want to start off by saying, on behalf of all the agents who investigate child abductions in the FBI, like myself, I want to offer you our worked thousands of cases where, unfortunately, parents have lost children. But I have to ask, how can you explain the fact that there's never been another case where the daughter of a businessman has been targeted by kidnappers for ransom? As Jim is asking this, Mr. Ramsey's leg begins tapping. He's gulping, noticeably swallowing hard, and says, And they left an extremely lengthy, confusing ransom note that was written on materials, with materials in the house. But then instead of kidnapping your daughter, they actually, and I'm sorry, but brutally murdered her, left the note and the body in the same location, in the same house. It's just never happened before. But what has happened before is tens of thousands of times in that same time period, there's been literally that many cases where somebody staged a crime scene to be something it was not. And this is John Ramsey's response. You know, that's the police theory, that Burke hit his sister and killed her, and that we, to protect Burke, staged this whole strangulation ransom note craziness. That theory would not make good crime fiction on television. It's absurd. The biggest flaw in that theory is that the coroner said the cause of death was strangulation and a severe blow to the head. Paula Woodward chimes in. They happened as close to simultaneous, and she was tortured with SA. John Ramsey kind of looks at her and says, well, anyway, to answer your question, I can't explain the criminal mind. 9 months later, there was a case where alarms were set and went off, and the father interrupted the perpetrator who was attempting to kidnap his daughter, and he fled. I believe the killer was in the house when we got home from dinner with friends. We went to bed, went to sleep. He was there for hours, I'm sure, waiting for us to fall asleep. Wrote the ransom note before abducting or killing JonBenet. John Douglas said no criminal could have written that note after such a horrible crime. So it was written beforehand, and I believe that's probably right. We were big fish in a small pond company. There'd been an article in early December about our achievements. I gave an interview, and they took my picture for the article, and I don't know if that made me a target or not. I think, as I said, I subscribe to John Douglas's theory, someone very angry and jealous of me.
So you were there, sitting in the audience. What did you think of the answer, of that answer?
I'm sorry.
When you were
Say it again.
sitting there, when you were there, what did you think of the answer? What is your feeling about the answer to this specific question?
Oh, I was like, wow, did he just say that? I was, because he said exactly what he said the response he gave was what the police thought. And then he described it quite intricately.
What I
The part where the part hold on, let me change my let me see if I can fix my earbuds.
can I continue?
Let me try it. Hold on.
So the part I thought was huge was John Ramsey actually saying that's the police theory, that the police theory is that Burke hit his sister, right?
Yeah.
Because I've never actually heard that the police saying that. I've never heard the police saying our theory is that.
Yeah.
So Ramsey saying that the police's theory is that is, as far as I'm concerned, huge. Speculated on it, but we've never actually heard him say that.
Yeah. And isn't that what they sued CBS about, though?
Sorry?
Isn't that why they sued CBS? That's the theory that they were going to say.
Yeah, the CBS basically then echoed the police theory. I just want to respond to where he says John Douglas said no criminal could have written that note after such a horrible crime. Well, there's a practice note. Mr. and Mrs. Ramsey, there's a practice note. And I think what is missing from that analysis from John Douglas is very respected, right? Very respected. But I'm going to disagree with him on that point, because the question is, what about if you've got a lot of time? If you've got a lot of time, how hard is it to write a note? So in other words, something traumatic happens, with unlimited time, how hard is it to do something? And I think what is actually being implied here is that if Patsy was responsible, and I don't think Patsy was responsible, but if Patsy was responsible, could she have written the note after having done something to JonBenet? I agree. I don't think she could have. Do you get what I'm saying?
Yeah. Yeah.
And that also,
admit that.
Yeah, that also I think is a whether you want to call it an error or a flaw in John Douglas's theory is does his theory include in its calculus a scenario where the person who wrote the note isn't the same person as the person who committed the horrible crime? And in a situation like that, of course, the person who didn't commit the crime could write the note like that. You know what I mean?
Right.
And so that's not part of this calculus, and that to me is a potential flaw to it. And so to say it was written beforehand, and he says, I believe that's probably right, I believe that's probably wrong. Well, I don't think it's probably wrong, but I think it's very likely wrong. But yeah, to me, the John Ramsey is actually saying what the police theory is, and then saying that it's Burke, that the police theory is Burke, that blew my mind. I was like, wow.
Yeah. Burke thought about that.
Yeah, I wonder what Burke thought about that. Yeah. And what is quite interesting with this is that in the middle of John Ramsey answering, and you could argue that Jim Clemente, I don't want to say stages, but he creates a scenario that it's almost like an ambush in a way. So he talks quite nicely to John, and then he hits him with this very hard question at the end of the sort of nice introduction. And John then starts answering it, and you've actually written here unintelligible. So something that he even said, people couldn't actually understand what he was saying. And then not only that, Paula Woodward jumps in to kind of save him in a way, you know, and then, yeah. And often I think you've got to look at the question that's being asked and the answer that is given and say, did he actually answer the question? Is the question in terms of its own merit, is it actually answered here? And then why not? Why isn't it answered? What isn't answered? And I think it is a great question, where he says, you know, the technicalities in terms of the JonBenet Ramsey case, the way it's being claimed is exceptional. And then he says, but you know what? Staging a crime scene is very common. And then John is supposed to respond to that. And how do you respond to that? What are you supposed to say? You know, was there a gasp in the audience when that question was asked?
No, not really. Some people wondered if John even ever realized who it was, but I think he did, because halfway through him asking John the question, John started getting like his hands going like this on his lap, because I think he realized, oh, what is going to happen? Like, he got really uncomfortable. He didn't know what to expect. But when he was done framing his question and waiting for response, John kind of snipped back at him. That's the police there doing, well, that's exactly what you're saying to me, because he knew that they worked on the case. So I don't know. Yeah, there wasn't like a big gasp, but you could also tell that Jim, he was offering sincere apologies for what happened to his daughter. And even me, where I stand, listening to John as a father who's talking about what he's talking about, I have compassion for him as a grieving father. I have compassion for whatever happened. I have compassion, but doesn't mean that I don't believe that he wasn't involved in some way.
Okay, next one.
I'll read the next one, and then I'll go straight to his last objective, because his answer to the question is basically he doesn't know. The red, you want to mute?
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
The red heart drawn on JonBenet's palm. Has anyone figured out if it was left by the killer or drawn by JonBenet? And John Ramsey says, not to my knowledge. No, I don't know. So he just doesn't know. And then he goes on to, they say, oh, you only have like 2 minutes left, a couple minutes left. So he describes his objective. And that is that child murders be a federal offense. We could bring the full resources of our country to bear on the murder of a child. If you rob a bank, you'll have the full focus of the FBI. I don't think we care more about our money than we do our children. Yet to me, that's the message we're sending. I'm energized to push forward with this. And then he stops, people start clapping, and then the creator of the CRIMECON event actually comes out on stage and says, oh, we've gotten 1,200 additional signatures for the DNA to be tested since you've spoken on this stage. And he concludes by saying, and DNA is the ultimate unbiased witness. And then it's just like curtain closed kind of thing. And I at first was like, why does he want this DNA tested? Why? And maybe, I know it's just a little amount, but it really won't look bad for him either way. So he's rallying for something to find this suspect, this murderer, this killer. And it looks really good that he's doing that, because why would he encourage that if he was involved? If he is or was involved, it's not going to prove anything, because you expect the family that live in the house, you expect their DNA to be there and to be on your child or on their clothing. So I don't think he has anything to lose unless it unless it proves somebody completely unrelated.
Yeah, I must say, if you say it's a DNA case, then I can understand you saying it's a DNA case if it's an intruder scenario, but if it's a family member, how is it a DNA case when all the family's DNA is all over anyway, kind of thing? You know, in the Chris Watson case, does DNA come up anywhere? DNA, you know what I mean? Like, the whole family are there. What is DNA really going to tell you? There was a bit of DNA, I think, on the necks of the children, you know, but it's DNA is not the sort of be-all, end-all, absolute smoking gun evidence that people think it is. People watch, I think, too much CSI and whatnot. DNA can be a smoking gun, but it's not always a smoking gun in every single case. And there is such a thing as a compromised crime scene. When you have people coming into a crime scene and compromising it, that can be the case. You can make the argument that under JonBenet's fingernails and on the inside of her long johns, that would be unlikely to be contaminated. You can make that argument. But at the same time, you can also say, you don't need to restrict your gaze to DNA. You can also look at the circumstantial aspect, which is huge in the JonBenet Ramsey case. Look at things like family dynamics. Look at the, yeah, I mean, don't really want to go into that too much, but the other thing is, other experts have said it is not a DNA case. So it's like, so much in the JonBenet Ramsey case is like, it's like turning water into wine. Patsy didn't write the ransom note. It was an intruder. The intruder got the pen and paper from the inside of the house, but nevertheless, he did that. So many things that are just like I said, turning water into wine. It's not this, it's that. And because it never really went to trial in a public sense, it kind of went to the grand jury. You know, it's like, what happened? And then I think the argument is that, but the grand jury didn't get to see the DNA, blah, 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 blah. They did, actually. There was DNA testing done when the grand jury voted. It wasn't like DNA was absolutely excluded. But because it didn't go to trial, now you can invert everything, just like you see some people doing with the Chris Watts case. Could it have been this? Could it have been that? Could it have been this? Could it have been that? And you can carry on forever because you don't have actual legal certainty on, you know, on issues. Except that you do have a certain amount of legal, I won't say certainty, but legal consensus, let's use that word. The grand jury were shown a lot of evidence over a year, over years worth of people testifying, and when they eventually voted, they voted a certain way. And what do you think they thought in terms of who wrote the ransom note? What do you think they thought in terms of all sorts of other things? Because they actually they were the first people in a legal setting to be asked, or to be to be presented with, either you believe an intruder is involved here or you don't. And what do you think they believe? So just put simply, do you think the grand jury who were presented with the best evidence, the best evidence, that like better evidence than any of us have ever seen, and what did they do with that evidence? Did they accept the intruder theory or not? And so why are the people still accepting it? And yeah, so I mean, not everyone wants to read the DNA stuff. And you know, I even sat in on when I sat in on the Henry van Breda trial, right? I mean, this is quite crazy. So it just seemed absolutely obvious that Henry van Breda committed the crime that he committed, and he was ultimately convicted, right? But you know what was interesting is they started that trial by going through the DNA, right? And what they were kind of doing is exactly the same thing. They were saying Henry didn't commit this crime, and intruder did, right?
Yeah, that's what they believe. No, I was just reading that. Sorry.
Yeah, and so what they did in terms of his case was they questioned all the DNA. They were like, was that sample a complete sample? No. Okay, so that's a questionable sample. And so let's say, for the sake of argument, that they collected 2,000 samples, but 300 of the samples were like problematic for whatever reason. They were incomplete or whatever. And then they kind of emphasized that. We don't know what was going on with those samples. Oh, so that means there was an intruder. No, doesn't mean that. It means we couldn't tell what that sample was. And so play those games with DNA, and you can say, oh, there's some DNA there, we can't explain it. That doesn't mean it was an intruder. It means there's some uncertainty about it. And it kind of works both ways. So the Henry van Breda case, also not a DNA case. Look at the circumstantial evidence, and so on and so on and so on. The Amanda Knox case, it's not a DNA case, but it was eventually treated like a DNA case. Then you say, well, the DNA is not conclusive. Oh, I've been exonerated. Okay. Anyway, so that's that.
Two things to note, or that I noted, is that when Jim Clemente was coming up to the microphone, there was a very short amount of time left for questions. That's why his was one of the last. They would like go on opposite sides of, there's two microphones, opposite sides of the room. They would go back and forth. Well, the people that work there had him cut a couple people so that his question made it to be asked. So they wanted his question to be asked. The people, I mean, he was there anyways as a guest, but they made sure that he got his question in. The person that he went in front of didn't seem too upset. And it was okay. And realized the importance of the conversation. And the other thing I noted is when we were walking out of the session, I heard someone behind me going, oh my gosh, yeah, I always thought the family was involved. She goes, there's no way. I don't believe that now at all. So he changed. At least one person that I heard behind me that used to think they might have been involved left after his presentation thinking what he wanted to be thought. And that's the vibe that I got. So I think he's probably pretty pleased with his 25-year media presentation.
I think in a situation like that, you've obviously read, Stephanie, you've read a lot of books, you've researched a lot beyond like you've gone far beyond the extra mile in terms of your knowledge of this case, right? But if you're someone who's sort of, yeah, I'm kind of interested in true crime and you're interested in the JonBenet Ramsey case, but you haven't really kind of, gone to a lot of effort and you're sort of on the fence, and you go into a room and the room is, let's say, 90% support the Ramseys. It's so easy just to go, yeah, that makes sense, that makes sense, that makes sense. Okay, I'm pretty sure they're innocent. And so if you look at what we've done in this live stream, we've provided additional context. And some of that context because of prior research, but some of the context you also need to go and check, which is something we've just done now. We checked that whole thing about 70 signatures. And what the guy actually says is not that 30 other people said something else, but actually said Patsy's was the best thing, kind of thing, Anyway, bottom line being, stuff like this, you really need to go and verify. You need to go and get the information and then also think for yourself. And instead, it's kind of like somebody telling you that this is a myth, but they are deciding, they are asking and answering their own questions. If you think about those myths, who came up with those questions and who came up with the answers? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. They came up with that.
And what the very last one was. What was the very last one in terms of that? The question and the answer.
Yeah. About the essay.
Yeah. Thanks very much for doing this. I don't think we're going to get through to Laurie Vallow or Delphi, but can we do that in another one?
Yeah, sure. Okay. And I'm going to continue to send my notes to you so you can share them. And then people can see, rather than just hearing me say it, you can read about it. And I like to see people's responses, what they think, or what stands out to them too. Thank you for being here. Sorry I didn't look at the chat, but I didn't want to get anything wrong from my notes, because I don't want to start any myths or give misinformation.
Okay, before we sign off, Stephanie, do you want to spend 3-4 minutes just going through chat, looking at questions, and then I'll do the same. I'm going to mute myself again.
Okay. There were 2 sets of fingerprints on the pineapple bowl, Patsy's and Burke's. And I recall also there was a glass with tea in it that had fingerprints on it as well. You're welcome. Thank you for watching. Thanks for staying with us. Any other questions about my experience or? Yes, you should all go and watch, and even me rewatch the JonBenet series that Nick invested so much time research. It was excellent. And there's even more on Patreon. Some of the episodes he did the first half an hour on YouTube, and then he would finish them on Patreon. John, as in John Ramsey, kind of, to me, like he had more than one face. So he was definitely putting on a show to be sweet and very complimenting of us being there and being good listeners and supportive. But he also came across of a more fragile, older man now. I'm not sure exactly how old he is, but he walks slower. He looks a lot older. And you could tell that he does still bear the weight of what happened to his family on his shoulders. And I felt compassion for for the grief of what he experiences. I can't imagine. But I also don't believe everything that he says. I did not see John's wife, but I was like 4 or 5 rows back. I was about 5 rows back. I don't know. And I didn't know what she looked like. So I didn't really know what his new or most recent wife looks like. And then when I looked her online, I did not recognize seeing her there. Yes, she's blonde. She seems quite a bit younger. You're welcome. Yeah, I know. I need binoculars. No, I actually got a really good seat. I just wasn't looking for her. I was too focused on the stage, I guess. Any other questions?
I just want to say hi to Bria. We've really missed you. I'm sorry for all the lives that were, like at 3 o'clock in the morning, your time. But wonderful to see you here again. Nisi, I've actually added you as a moderator, but I'm not quite sure why it's not showing. Maybe in the next live it'll be activated. I'm not quite sure. But anyway, Bria, good to see you here.
She has one. She has it.
Oh, does she? Okay.
Yeah. She's been working hard. You're very welcome. Got a lot more to share. This was just one 50-minute session worth. You're very
okay. How many of you are going to watch Depp versus Heard next week?
Am I? Well, actually, I work more than I usually do this upcoming week, so I'm not sure. Amy, I work part-time for a family pharmacy. I have very flexible hours. So I'm fortunate. I used to teach first grade, and then I stayed home with my children. They're older now, but I didn't go back to teaching. But I don't know about it. It's very controversial. And my first instinct was not fond of Ms. Heard, but that was only going by. I was a big fan of Johnny Depp's work. Now I'm not a big fan of him at all. Not saying that I just didn't know anything really about her, but seeing both sides, I think that there's some super toxicity from both of them. I don't know if I want to watch it or not.
Just for a heads up. So Amber will go back on the stand giving a testimony in chief, and then is her surname Lopez, Johnny Depp's attorney. She's quite good looking. She's quite attractive. She will be cross-examining Amber Heard. Mm-hmm. She's already said that Amber Heard's giving the performance of her life. I think that's what she said. I think she said that in opening statements to the jury. So not going to mince words. Also, can you believe this? The defense are going to be calling Johnny Depp to the stand. The defense are going to be calling Johnny Depp as kind of a witness. So that's going to be really interesting. I think it may have something to do with where Johnny Depp, in a text message, said that he cut off his own finger. I think that's really what they want to be addressing. Because there's this question, did Amber cause the finger to be cut off or did Johnny do it? And so I think that might be, Rottenborn has brought that up before, but it might be brought up again.
I don't find the trial very becoming of either of them. And I'm glad that they are both not together anymore. That's all I can say is I'm glad they're not together anymore, because I think it could have escalated even more between the two of them.
Okay, Amy says, did John have security? Do you mean at CrimeCon?
Trying to think. No, not that I saw. There was security there for people in general, and some walked out on stage with security, but he was not one of them. That was a good question. Oh, I didn't see your question, Pauline. What was your question? Ask it again, or I'll go up. Look. Did Paula Woodward talk about her new book? She mentioned it. I didn't think it was important, so I didn't make note of it. But she was there for promoting her book. I kind of was like, why are you spokesperson of Mr. Ramsey and his PR partner? But my top 3 events, the Nancy Grace taping for her Crime Time with Nancy, or Crime Stories with Nancy. That was one of my favorites. My other was the Libby German's sister, Kelsey German. She did 2 sessions. One was with her family, and one was with 2 other women who also have missing or lost sisters, or lost their sisters to crime. That was a phenomenal series. I haven't written about that one yet for you. And my third was seeing Mr. David Robinson share about his missing son, Daniel Robinson, because my heart is invested in that case, because I've followed it on Grizzly True Crime, and then also on his Help Find Daniel YouTube channel. So it was nice to meet him and shake his hand and say I'm sorry for the circumstances. No, Nick, no, not at all. Not a bit. No. They went into a lot of the social media part of it, because that's where it's been headed with the Delphi case.
I would just say the reason why I didn't give that side much credence is because it totally then dismisses the social media aspect, and you would imagine that was how those kids were lured. They weren't just going there for a stroll. I don't believe, anyway. I don't think they just were like, let's go for a walk on this bridge. I think they were there to meet someone. You know what I mean? And a panhandler is not going to be doing social media kind of thing.
No. And I wouldn't want to bring up anything that was a conspiracy that would upset families. They had a message that they were sharing, and hopefully they certainly reached at least 5,000 people there. Hopefully someone else has had some interaction with the account and can shed some more light. They were just, the way they set it up, it's crazy though, because I had to choose for each session that I attended for CrimeCon. There were at least 4 I had to miss. So it was like I saw so much, but I missed so much. Yeah, the crime scene investigator for the for Casey Anthony, who found Kaylee Anthony, that was a very emotional session that I'll share about. That was, I mean, it's so hard. I shared 3 that meant something to me, but there is a lot. Also, learned about the woman who interviewed BTK for like over 5 or 6 years worth of correspondence with him. That was a fascinating session. Learning about the Long Island serial killer and through the podcast Unraveled, that was a fascinating session, and it's like an hour and a half away from where I live, so that was really interesting. It was also a lot of there was advertisement too, I will say, because it was sponsored by Oxygen, and so they would, they would share their upcoming series news, which is great because I just was making note of all the things that I want to watch and listen to. So there was a big advertisement spiel at the end of the most recent releases. I think, is it on HBO that there's a new one with the Michael Peterson case, The Staircase? Is it with Colin Firth? It was really good.
Did you?
I want to see it.
Did you catch where Jim Clemente spoke about the West Memphis 3 thing? Did you attend that?
I did not, but I can watch it. But it was, like I said, it was just picking and choosing. It was really hard.
Can you still stream it, or if you want to?
Oh yeah. I have every single episode on my computer that was aired.
Will you stream? Will you make notes? Because
to
be honest,
that's how I did the Lori Vallow one for you. I was able to take notes on the Lori Vallow one because I missed that to see John Ramsey, because I figured it's been 25 years. When will I have that opportunity again? I think with the Vallow case, they'll probably have someone there next year talking about it at CRIMECON again. So I chose to go to the Ramsey one. But because I didn't want to miss the information on the Lori Vallow Daybell case, I was able to increase my ticket so that I could watch what I missed when I got home. And it's good that they do that, because otherwise they'd have a lot of angry CrimeConners. So I will.
Sorry, not there yet. Says Johnny Depp's, is he a supporter of the West Memphis 3? Yes, he has been. To be honest, that's been that's kind of been in the forefront of my mind, that knowledge that's the case. Yes, he's also a supporter of the West Memphis 3.
I rejoice.
Funnily enough, I actually mentioned the West Memphis 3 at the end of my video on Vicky White, just because that's actually how Damien Eccles and Laurie Davis met, was by writing letters, and they're married today. They've been married for quite a few years. So writing letters, if you want to, hook up with someone, that's the way to do it.
Yeah, one of the, is it a Jason or a Michael Baldwin that was one of the Memphis 3? One of the ones that took the Alford plea. He was supposed to be at CrimeCon, and I was going to go watch his presentation, but he ended up having to go to court, so he couldn't come. I don't know what that was about, but he wasn't able to come to CrimeCon.
So he was a no-show.
He was a no-show. So was Dr. Phil. People were like, "Where's Dr. Phil?" I didn't care about that, but that happens when you have guests and they can't make it. Oh, you know who else? I really wanted to see. Oh, now I'm gonna forget. Oh, Joe Kendra. right? He was supposed to be there, and he had last minute travel restrictions. So I don't know. I was speculating what might have happened with him, but I wanted to hear him. He would.
Did you speak to a CRIMECON official and say you have to get TCRS here?
I didn't know who to speak to. Yeah, you have to though. There's so many. There was, I don't know, like 75 channel podcasts. So I can only imagine how many that they had inquire. But I'd almost I'd almost rather not be a podcaster and go as a speaker of some sort of topic, if you could, even if it was like on the Oscar Pistorius trial in journalism. Because if you go as a speaker, you have a session, and then you get to go enjoy all the other sessions. If you go as like a podcaster, like you're in this room pretty much. Some people live stream from there just the whole time, unless you get up to eat.
Yeah, I think it depends. Like if you're lucky enough to be a speaker, then that's great. But if you're not, then you are going to be stuck. So then you make the most of it.
Right. But you get to meet all the people in the world who follow you. And you'll be completely humbled by it, as some others have shared. It's humbling to get to meet all the people that support you, care about you.
I do want to go to America. I do want to meet you guys. I do want to certainly not this book, but I want to like take my books along and do a paper
copy. I want a signed copy. Never is before.
There's a joke where they sort of show what do they say, ebook signing or what ebook launch, and then it's just like a cell phone on a table. You know what I mean? So you do want to engage directly with your readers and your viewers and so on.
Oh my gosh.
And,
yeah, all the people would bring their books for you to sign. You could bring a few, only so many you could bring, but
yeah, I mean,
everyone had swag they were giving out, like stickers and stress balls.
What married, I don't have kids, and theoretically if I come to the States and let's say a case breaks while I'm there, I could cover it while I'm there, kind of a little bit like the interview room sometimes does. You sort of go on site and you're there and you speak to people. And I used to be a investigative reporter. I used to sort of do that more with travel stories, but I could definitely do that. And because I'm not married, I don't have kids, I could be in the States for weeks at a time, months at a time, if I wanted to. I'm just saying, if a case broke while I was there, I could sort of do the Brian Enton version of reporting kind of thing, and I would quite like that. But I do certainly want to go to Colorado. A lot of these places that you've written about, you want to stomp around. I remember when my co-author at the time we were going to write about Casey Anthony, and she called me on the phone to say, I'm right there at Kaylee's grave. And I was like, okay, well, go in there. And it was like, I just sort of felt like, I wish I was there. I know what I want to look at. I know what I want to do. That reminds me, I need to be uploading chapter 18 of Treachery for you. Did you do much listening to the audiobook on your way back from CRIMECON? Or were you quite tired?
I listened to as much as I could, and I think I got through like chapter 14 or something.
So how many chapters in the trip to CrimeCon and back, how many chapters did you go through?
I ended with I was starting at chapter 15 when I got home.
Oh, so but did you start at chapter 1 when you left?
Yeah, even though I'd read it on my own because I have it on Kindle, I started the audiobook at the first chapter because I waited. Like I had heard it, but then I stopped listening, and then I wanted to hear it all in one. I'd probably do it again. You're done with that.
I must say, narrating it doesn't happen all that often, but sometimes I read my own work and I'm like, geez, this is good. This is, I don't know, just it's got like a freshness to it. And I definitely think Treachery, The 5-Month Search for Kaylee Anthony is one of my best executed books. It's one of the more recent books I've written. But it was shortly after that book that I wrote the Chris Watts series. In fact, I was working on Veil of Tears, the third book, which deals with the I think August onwards or something like that, in the search for Kaylee Anthony, and that's when the Chris Watts case happened, and then I just dropped it.
Yeah. And I know you mentioned it in some of the chapters. Oh, I'll be talking about this more in the next book, and I'm like, oh, it's not here.
Yeah, it's not happening. Yeah. I would say every month that goes by, I'm more certain I'm not going to write again for a couple of years. I really want to not write for a while. Maybe when I'm 60 or even 65, I'll continue again. Maybe by then I will have lost my touch. We'll see.
Nisi, thank you for being here. We gave you quite a big experience for moderating in one of the longest lives I've been on ever. So thank you so much, so much. And thank you to all the mods who are here and all the subscribers and members who are listening or watching. I did see Real Batman 900 mention Orlando any day. Well, I got the day for you. Mark it in your calendar. CrimeCon Orlando, September 22nd to the 24th, 2023. So it's not this September, it's the following September. And I'm going to go because I had a great time, even though I didn't know anybody. I made friends. I'm going to have a blast, and I would love to be in touch with some of you if East Coast Orlando is easier. So September 22nd to the 24th, 2023 is CrimeCon Orlando, and the hotel is the World Center Marriott. It is a huge, beautiful, luxurious facility. Go a couple of days, go by the pool.
Yeah. Is it on the beach?
I don't know how close it is to the beach, but the facility itself is incredible. If you go on and look it up, it's the World Center Marriott. It's beautiful. It can't be too far from the beach.
Yeah, I would imagine it would be on the beach if it's in Florida. But anyway, okay. So Bria says, let's plan it. It would be great if we could have a big TCRS reunion there. You know, if we could get everyone there. Bria and I've kind of been talking about, well, we either do that or we must go and hike around Annapurna in the Himalayas or something, like 10 of us or something.
Yeah, that's cool. I couldn't go. I don't know. I feel like my drive is more excited than what my body might be able to do. We'll have to see. I have to get a little bit more rigorous. Bria, you are so. I need your training first.
Teresa Moore, good to see you, although you are joining us like in literally the last 1 or 2 minutes. So sorry about that. I just want to thank all the,
I was going to say, we're doing what Gisela says, the waffle time. The waffling.
Yeah, that's it. We're in the end game of this live stream. It is one of the longest ever, so good job, Stephanie. Everyone, let's just give Stephanie a bit of a hand for going to CrimeCon, for taking such great notes, for not shaking her head too much. Well, I'm not sure she should be commended on that, but she got out of the room alive, put it that way.
I know, I made it home. My mom was like, maybe we should split up in sessions. I was like, no, I'm not going into a session by myself. I might not come out.
Also great to see Bria, great to have an extra mod. Welcome to Nisi. You've done a good job. Thanks very much. But thanks everyone for attending. JC, by the way, Jean Harris, I think daughters were graduating today, right?
University, twin daughters, university.
Daughters or sons?
Daughters.
Daughters, yeah. So missed her, but congratulations on that. All the members, thanks very much. Also, thank you for the super chats. Always much appreciated. Maybe if Stephanie's husband can share Stephanie with us next Saturday, then we'll be back in this slot for debrief part 2, and we'll probably look at what Laurie Vallow, right?
Yes, I can say it will have to be after. It would have to be later if it's on Saturday because I'm working till 3. I mean, it could be after 3, but that'll be later for you.
What time it'll be? I'm a little bit confused. Yeah, my sleep patterns are a little bit chaotic. Speaking of which, I'm really, really tired. I don't know if you've seen me yawning, but I'm really, really tired. I need to go and sleep.
Sorry.
Great job, Stephanie. It's really been.
Oh, I have to show you what I got.
Woohoo! Good job. Good job.
I can't even do it. I don't know where to go.
Open it up. Open it.
Well, I just got it, so it's. But look.
Okay. Cool. There we go. So make sure you guys get your TCRS notebook. It is on Amazon.
It's nice. What I like about it is you can kind of, when you're writing, it's like soft cover, so you could fold it back. I like that. And it's not super big, so you could just fit it in your backpack if you go to CrimeCon or luggage. Real handy.
And don't forget to send me those snaps of the intertextuality t-shirts.
I will. I'll do that soon.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Stephanie, have a great rest of your weekend, and everyone else. Anything else you want to say to anyone, Stephanie?
I'm just really glad to have been able to share a little bit about the experience. As I go through the other sessions, I can tell more narrative-like pieces about what happened.
Sorry about the audio being the way it is. I don't know why that is. I don't know. One thing, let's just try quickly. Stephanie, turn your audio off. Do I sound normal? Do I sound the same, or do I sound different? It's just so frustrating because there always seems to be something that prevents normal communication when I do something like this. Just like, yeah, it's almost like not meant to be. I don't know.
I'm talking. I'm muted.
Yeah. Anyway,
me.
I hope it wasn't too bad, the sound. We did try and do our best. Sometimes it is. Remember, StreamYard is trying to coordinate communications from opposite sides of the planet. There are limits to even what we can do with technology. So I'm sorry if it wasn't perfect, but I certainly enjoyed it. I can hear Stephanie fine. I think you can hear me as well. It's just how it comes on. The other thing that's weird is when I see us on the phone, you crystal clear, I'm crystal clear, and then on YouTube it's sort of like grainy. It's also quite weird. Certainly from my side, not quite sure why that is. Nisi says listening to you both was worth the noise. Okay, I hope a lot of you feel that way. on StreamYard, it doesn't actually show mods, but on YouTube it does show them. Okay. True Jedi Forever says it's an echo or vibration after Steph speaks. Okay. Nick, do you have a link to buy your books on Amazon? I'm just traveling at the moment. If you just Google Amazon Nick van der Leek, VANDERLEEK, then you'll find your way there. It's quite easy. Susan says, keep journaling. You will always have your touch. Susan, I do actually write every single day on Patreon. I actually know that I sometimes leave typos behind and so on, but I kind of do it quite quickly. But I do actually write every single day anyway. But it's not quite the same as the work ethic of writing chapters and narratives and things like that. But I am at least writing every day, so that'd be something. Have a nice slumber. Thanks a lot. I'll probably put up a video on what you expect in the Amber Heard, not the Amber Heard trial, but that trial, just in terms of what's coming up. I've been meaning for so long to put up a video on Alec Baldwin dealing with him. I don't know if you guys know this. He said there was no recoil. He said when the gun went off, he felt no recoil. So I've been meaning to do a video on that for quite a while. And then also, Vicky White looks like she has a daughter. It's not clear whether it's her stepdaughter, but it does look like she has a daughter. Is she going to be speaking out next? Well, we'll see. Maybe her mother as well. I wouldn't be surprised if her mother speaks out at her funeral. Her mother is Pat Davies, I think. Yeah. So, yeah, I must say the Casey White, Vicky White thing has been suddenly gathered a lot of momentum out of nowhere, which is quite interesting. Anyway, next week, Saturday, hopefully we'll see Stephanie with, we'll do Laurie Vallow, right, Stephanie?
Sure.
Okay. Stephanie, Timmy's literally been jumping up against my chair. I think he's decided that's enough. And so he's saying goodbye.
Good night, Timmy.
He says goodbye. Looks a bit like Chewbacca. Yeah. Kind of
Yeah.
like Chewbacca.
He looks so
Okay.
happy.
Have a good evening and rest of your weekend. Not that there's too much, but
Thank
yeah.
you for having me.
Yeah, no, it was really good. Thanks so much for your work, all the effort in those notes. Thanks a lot.
It wasn't just
Okay.
for fun. I was on a mission.
You were. You did well. Mission accomplished.
Okay. Bye.
Thank you. Bye. Thanks, guys.